I'm not really sure if Nintendo thought about the long-term logistics of calling something new. New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS has been out for over 20 years now. And while the 4 games across 5 releases have been a huge success for the franchise, the image that this series has held amongst the fandom has fluctuated wildly throughout the years. And even though there were a lot of releases in a fairly short amount of time, every single release kind of made sense. I mean, the first one is kind of obvious. This was New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. It was the first 2D Mario game since Super Mario World, if you're not counting the Yoshi game. You're effectively looking at close to a 15-year gap since the release of the last mainline 2D Mario. Now, if you really wanted to break it down, this wouldn't account for the handheld stuff. After Super Mario World, you would have Super Mario Land 2, but that also came out in 1992, so 2006 was still quite a ways away. However, Nintendo did effectively restart the entirety of their 2D Mario franchise in handheld form all throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, with the first Super Mario Bros. As well as the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, otherwise known as the Lost Levels, releasing on the Game Boy Color in the form of Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, followed by Super Mario Bros. 2, World, Super Mario Bros. 3, and even Yoshi's Island getting Game Boy Advance ports. So if you were a kid that was born in the early to mid 90s and you grew up on a Game Boy Advance or even the Game Boy Color prior to that, if your experience of the 2D Mario was effectively the handheld experience, then the timeline that takes you from the first Super Mario Bros. Game that you played on the Game Boy Color to the first new Super Mario Bros. Title that you played on the Nintendo DS in 2006, it might actually feel like a lot more natural of a progression through the 2D Mario franchise. Now, initially, I grew up with these titles on the NES, but even more so on the SNES. However, given that I was basically a kindergartner during that time, I didn't truly fall in love and master the 2D Mario franchise until I got to the Game Boy Advance. So for me, by the time we got the Nintendo DS, shortly after that picked up Super Mario Bros., I didn't really feel the weight of that gap as much as so many other gamers might have. Now, the DS version was a very big deal, not only because it was a return to the roots of Mario, but also because it was still like a 3D game, it was just on a 2D plane. Fairly common now, but at the time, the idea of a 2.5D platformer was fairly novel. And it was a realization that there was still a lot of demand for 2D platformers, not only in the handheld space, but eventually into the home console world as well. New Super Mario Bros. Was such a massive success that they effectively decided to do the game again on the Nintendo Wii. At least that's how people play it off. Now, obviously, there is a lot of synergy amongst the various new Super Mario Bros. Titles, and looking at all of them side by side, if you're not an expert of the franchise, you might not even be able to tell the difference of which one is which. But in my opinion, the actual games themselves do change enough as you run through them, so that each title is actually worth playing on its own merits, and each experience is at least to an extent unique in comparison to the others, even if it might not seem like so on the surface. But to put it into the simplest terms, the first one made sense because it was the first one. It was New Super Mario Bros. For the DS, the game that I will be covering throughout this video. Well, what happens when New Super Mario Bros. Is an absolute success, and you have a home console in the form of the Nintendo Wii breaking records left and right? You release a sequel for the Nintendo Wii. The Wii game did expand a little bit on New Super Mario Bros. DS in the form of giving you the rideable Yoshi as well as 4-player co-op. This obviously meant that the levels were designed a little bit differently, things were zoomed out, there was a bit of a shake gimmick since it's a Wii game after all, but it wasn't nearly as intrusive as some of the other games on that console. But regardless, the biggest selling point of this title was undoubtedly the 4-player co-op. And, well, the fact that it was the Wii, and it was a 2D Mario title, so it was obviously going to do great. So 2006, you get it on the DS, 2009, you get it on the Wii, and then 3 years later in 2012, well, you get it both on the 3DS and on the Wii U. And obviously this is the point where everybody started to feel like it was just a little bit too much, especially considering New Super Mario Bros. U was a launch title for the new HD console. So this was the Mario title that you were starting off your new Nintendo generation with. Obviously not the best idea. Now, to zoom out a bit and just kind of break it down, effectively what we had here was New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS, even though it was the third game in the franchise. So basically, the logic for this is that New Super Mario Bros. On the DS was the first New Super Mario Bros. Title, and then New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS was the sequel to that game. And it makes sense. The way that the 3DS game plays feels like it's an advancement on what was on the DS. The co-op is stripped away and the levels are designed more for the smaller screen. It has the added gimmick of all of the coins that you can collect, but the gameplay itself, due to the smaller real estate of the screen size, feels much more similar to what was on the DS. And on the home console side of things, well, New Super Mario Bros. U obviously has the name because it's on the Wii U, and it is very much the sequel to New Super Mario Bros. Wii. So even though this feels like it's just a mess of New Super Mario Bros. Title, there's actually some logic to their decisions. They had the 3DS and the Wii U released by 2012, and they made a sequel to the game that was on the DS, as well as the one for the Wii, and released them across both consoles. And each one of the games feels like a sequel of the ones that came out before it on the similar type of platform. But still, if you're sitting there in 2012 and you're wondering what Nintendo is doing after their rough launch to the 3DS, as well as their very rough launch for the Wii U, and you just see two more of these same New Super Mario Bros. Titles that, especially on the surface, don't really seem like they add too much to the franchise, it's very easy to write them off at that point. And while I think it's a bit harsh to do so, it was probably deserved given the context. And then when you add on to all of this mess, a year later you get New Super Luigi U, which was originally DLC, where you start as Luigi and the levels are a little bit smaller and more difficult on the Wii U game, but it was also resold as a standalone title to celebrate the year of Luigi in 2013. Effectively, what happens is you're taking franchise fatigue and you're just tiring it out even more. Mario Maker comes out and it has the New Super Mario Bros. U themes. And then on the 3D side of things, you got 3D Land and 3D World, which were good in their own right, but they weren't like the big open world 3D Mario game that would follow the open sandbox of some of the previous titles, or even the grandiose feeling that you saw during the Galaxy titles. And all of this repetitiveness starts to compound one after the other during this very rough era for Nintendo, making many people suggest that Nintendo effectively has run out of ideas, and all I'm gonna say is they are very lucky the Nintendo Switch was very successful, and it was largely due to Mario Odyssey at launch, or at least in the first year. Because even when we went back to the 2D Mario games in New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, simply just a port of the Wii U game of Super Mario Bros. U as well as New Super Luigi U. By that point in time, because Nintendo's image was effectively saved with the launch of the Switch, people were a lot more forgiving to the New Super Mario Bros. Franchise, even though they still felt like it was largely overdone by then. So yeah, while it seems like there were just millions of these games made, effectively it was only 4 and 1 per each console. New Super Mario Bros. DS in 2006, New Super Mario Bros. Wii in 2009, and then in 2012 you got a game for the Wii U and the 3DS in the same year. And quite frankly, I thought back then, and I still think now, that all 4 of those releases made full sense, and I don't think it was really overdone. Not until later down the line, anyway. Now, I have an affinity for every one of these titles. The DS one is the first one. That's the one that I decided to buy as soon as it came out because I was very excited to jump back into 2D Mario, just like many of the other Mario fans out there. The Wii version was awesome. I had such a great time running through that game 4-player co-op with my family and friends. The 3DS game got the least amount of attention from me, and I don't think it was bad, but I definitely spent the least amount of time on it just because of where I was in my life, but also because I was having a lot more fun playing New Super Mario Bros. U in 4-player co-op. And then finally, when they ported New Super Mario Bros. U from the Wii U to the Switch, and I had it available at handheld at that point, I naturally decided to 100% New Super Mario Bros. U in single player, something that I hadn't done with any of the other New Super Mario Bros. Games. And it was when I fully completed New Super Mario Bros. U that I really started to appreciate the franchise, realizing that it was more than just simply a casual Mario title. I mean, you guys probably expect it by now if you've watched any of my other Mario videos before this, or even the Donkey Kong and the Banjo-Kazooie one. But so many of these titles that I feel like have a very low bar to get into become significantly more enjoyable when you're going for that full completion. Especially because so much of that full completion is figuring out how to grab the MacGuffins. And you know, I love me a collectathon, even if it's in the background of a 2D platformer. Here's the funny part, however. Back in 2019, after playing New Super Mario Bros. U, I told myself that I would run through every single one of these games again, and I would actually fully complete them. So I figured after the success of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, the first 3 titles would also get ported over to the Nintendo Switch, and I would wait for that to happen before deciding to do so. And, well, that's why it took me so long to finally get back to this series. Because despite what everybody expected, those ports didn't exactly follow. Now, to kind of reel things way back in just a little bit, believe it or not, I actually had no intention of playing New Super Mario Bros. Right now. I recently ran through Mario 3D Land and 3D World, and prior to that was Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64. The plan for me was to jump from Mario 3D World to either Super Mario Odyssey or Banjo-Tooie. And there is still very much a plan for me to jump into one of those games fairly soon. But believe it or not, after playing through 3D Land and 3D World, I kind of just wanted that 2D Mario experience. I wanted specifically that new Super Mario Bros. Experience. The simple level design with the few collectibles along the way, where I'm focusing a little bit more on the platforming and how each one of the MacGuffins is hidden creatively throughout the stages, where the difficulty spikes occur, which moments cause me to lose a bunch of lives over and over again, even if the games as a whole were pretty easy because you're able to have close to 100 lives at any given time as long as you are somewhat experienced with Mario titles. And really just to all around enjoy that more straightforward platforming experience, admittedly while searching through every nook and cranny in the stage to find the hidden secrets. It's not that I find this style of gameplay to be better than the open world collectathon approach of something like Mario Odyssey or Banjo-Tooie, but at the very least, after I finished 3D World, I did want a little bit more, so I figured I'd at least jump in with New Super Mario Bros. DS. It's a shorter game anyway, so it won't really take me that long to run through, and I figured depending on how much I enjoyed going through the game, as well as how much I enjoyed making a video about this title, I can kick the can down the road a little bit and then figure out if I want to play Odyssey or Banjo-Tooie next. Of course, this is just a little bit problematic because now one of the options is also New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Or, obviously, it could be any other franchise. There's many games I haven't covered yet. But this is all just something that future me can worry about. For now, I think it's actually just worth jumping straight into this one. It's a New Super Mario Bros. Title. It's a 2D Mario. You gotta move to the right side of the screen, you gotta jump when there's something in front of you to jump over, you have to find all of the star coins along your way in order to get full completion, you need to use specific power-ups in order to find all of the hidden secrets and all of the secret exits that every stage has to offer, because that's part of the full completion, and obviously you have to run through all 8 of the worlds to get those sought-after 3 stars on your saved file. There's no need to break it down any further than that into the introduction. Rather, when there are specific moments in the game that are worth talking about, for example, how you can choose to go to either World 3 or World 4 depending on how you beat the castle in World 2, I'd rather just kind of get into that as we approach those moments in the game. This might be a 2D Mario game, but we're still going to tackle it the exact same way we've tackled all of the titles before this. We're going to head over to World 1, and we're going to grab every one of the star coins in every single stage and move forward. But prior to that, we can enjoy the very brief opening sequence. Yeah, big surprise. Princess Peach is kidnapped. Mario and Peach are going on a walk, lightning strike hits the castle, Mario runs up to check it out, and Bowser Jr. grabs Peach and runs off. That's it. That's the opening sequence. Now, the actual map of this title is very straightforward in that you're mostly moving just left to right, but it's also a lot more detailed than some of the mainline 3D Mario games that came after it, specifically Galaxy 2 and 3D Land. But if you consider that this effectively followed Super Mario World, it does leave a lot to be desired. Even if the visuals, specifically back in 2006, were a massive leap forward for the franchise. Now, while the maps in each world are pretty straightforward, there are secrets galore. Every world has at least a few stages that will require finding a secret exit. Those secret exits will either take you towards a bonus house or towards a warp pipe that'll let you jump forward to later on in that same world, or to a cannon that'll let you skip not only the world that you're in, but even some of the upcoming worlds along your way. These are very neat hidden secrets for speedruns. You might even consider finding these out pretty cool if you were a young gamer and this was your first 2D Mario title, but if you're going back to this game now, they're not going to mean much. They're just things to check off of a box to get through the title. Having the ability to save games dramatically lowers the value of these shortcuts. Now, they are still cool to find, and if you're somebody that just plays these games in order to see Bowser Castle and you don't care about how many worlds you beat along your way, then you also might find value in finding these shortcuts. But if you're like me and your goal is to go through every single one of the levels and collect every single one of the star coins along the way, it kind of defeats the purpose of the adventure. Now, famously, one of the biggest drawbacks of this title is that it's actually hard to keep track of what you've completed and what you haven't, even if it's fairly straightforward. So for example, if you happen to beat a stage that has a secret exit, you also have to beat it the regular way. Or if you happen to unlock a cannon and you decided to move on because you don't want to use the cannon, well, you actually have to take every one of those cannons at least once in order to have the level officially considered complete. And there's technically no official visual cue as to whether or not a stage may have multiple secret exits. Rather, it's kind of about using your Mario intuition to figure it out as you go along. And typically what this all amounts to is just a whole lot of threads online of people saying, how do I get the 3rd star in New Super Mario Bros. DS? I already accomplished everything. And sure enough, it's always something. I mean, shoot, even at the end of the game, you're given a chance to spend all of the remaining star coins that you still have on the visual backgrounds of the touchscreen, and you have to actually buy every one of those things to be considered fully complete, even though a player may not know that. But yeah, it might be worth keeping a notepad nearby to check things off as you go along. However, as it were, it starts off pretty simply. You jump into the grasslands of World 1, with World 1-1 feeling like a modernized version of its counterpart on the NES. The biggest change, however, comes fairly early on in the level, where you jump and grab a Mega Mushroom, and this is the first Mega Mushroom of the entirety of the franchise. Mario turns massive. He's not only invincible, but he can just break everything that's not supposed to be broken as he moves along. It's a relatively rare power-up in this game, along with a couple of others, like the Blue Shell and the Mini Mushroom, but it shows up often enough to still be a relevant portion of the game. It's also front and center in the marketing material, highlighting just how big Mario has gotten at the time of the release of this game, both literally and figuratively. Now, the Mega Mushroom does offer you the chance to collect a whole bunch of 1-ups, depending on how much damage you do, and you can make that damage even more when you decide to ground pound and a bunch of enemies fall from the sky. With this large size, however, you're also able to run directly and grab the first star coin in this stage. But you also have to be careful because you could accidentally destroy the warp pipe that would take you to the 2nd star coin, which is right around the middle of the level. Taking that warp pipe will actually move Mario underground, which is pretty cool because this is a Nintendo DS, so it takes you from the top screen to the bottom screen. Much like Super Mario 3D Land, the bottom screen is fairly underutilized. It serves more as a zoomed out map to give you an idea of how far along you are in the level, as well as a HUD to keep track of the star coins that you've collected, the score you've gotten, your live counter, all the usual stuff that would normally show up on the main screen. In fact, the only time that I ever actually have to interact with the bottom screen is when I want to touch the backup power-up that I have in reserve, which is easy enough on original hardware, but during emulation, it could be a bit cumbersome. Although if you're playing on a Steam Deck or with a Steam controller, or really any controller that happens to have mouse control built into it, that becomes a lot easier. In any case, this underground segment does lead you towards the 2nd star coin, and when you pop back up to the surface, shortly after that, a player will find the final goal flag, which obviously is pretty interesting because that means you only finish the stage with 2 star coins. Well, sure enough, when you go underground in order to grab that 2nd star coin and you pop back up from the green pipe that's just beyond it, you actually pass the 3rd star coin. So you'll either have to backtrack before finishing the stage or run through it one more time and make sure you don't go underground, and make sure you're also large enough to ground pound so you can break the blocks that's hiding the 3rd star coin. All in all, it's fairly straightforward, but it is a 1-1 level, and it teaches you everything you pretty much need to know to get through a vast majority of this title. The simple nature of the controls, what at least one of the new power-ups does, and how diligent you'll have to be while searching for the star coins. After that, you move straight into 1-2, which, as many of you might have guessed, is an underground level. It's 1-2 after all. The stage gives players a chance to experiment with the fact that if you're holding down a ground pound after jumping onto blocks, you can go straight down that entire row of blocks, making it a lot more useful than just ground pounding over and over again. You'll also notice pretty early on in the level the first star coin, which is hidden just above you by jumping on some blocks, and as you move forward you'll notice that the ceiling is no longer solid ground and rather it is another row of blocks. Then it's a 1-2 stage, so obviously you'll want to jump on top of there if you want to experiment. Makes it kind of fun to just run over the entire stage, but unfortunately since you are trying to collect star coins, you'll have to periodically jump back down in order to grab them. Now as you run through the level, you will find some platforms that will slant towards the side that you're standing on, and eventually if you're searching through all the warp pipes, you will find one that will take you even further underground. In this section, the average player might just collect the coins that they see and then head straight through the green pipe, but a true Mario fan will know that they can jump on the Koopa and use the shell to break the blocks that are beneath the green pipe and find out what's hidden towards the right. After performing a series of crouch jumps, of course. Ultimately, the only thing a player is going to collect over here is just a Mega Mushroom, but it's a fun hidden area nonetheless. Now, heading back up towards the end of the stage, of course, there is going to be a hidden route on top that you can run over. It's 1-2 after all, and doing so will lead you not only towards the 3rd star coin, but also towards an alternate exit. And you know it's an alternate exit because there's a red flag waiting for you. Those are the secret exits. This one is very easy to find, and obviously it's the 2nd level of the game. And I appreciate how Nintendo kind of taught people about these secret exits. I mean, most people that would be jumping into this game have played Super Mario Bros., so they would know to jump over the ceiling at the end of the stage. It's a very easy way to use a secret that most people would find to teach them about all of the various different type of alternate exits that you can get through in this title. And doing so would actually allow you to skip one of the upcoming stages. But of course, in our case, we're just gonna run back into the stage and go to the regular exit so we can move on and collect everything. Something I do notice that stands out to me quite a bit is whenever I do run back into these levels so I can complete them the intended way after I've already collected all of the star coins, I notice just how ridiculously easy this game can get if you weren't trying to go for full completion. But I also notice how fun it is to try to platform through everything as fast as possible. And it really just kind of encapsulates the feeling that these are very easy games to jump into, but can be extremely tricky to master. In any case, with the secret entrance accomplished, you'll be able to access the red toad houses, which will give you a random item. And with the regular exit complete, you can enter World 1-3, a mushroom stage, just like in Super Mario Bros. On the NES. But it is a bit different. Obviously, it's more colorful. Some of the mushrooms will be swinging back and forth. You'll find these propeller springs that you can jump on and they'll skyrocket you upwards. As we move on to the series, these will become their own power-up, but this is where all of those originated from, these springs. If you follow through all of these springs, you'll actually make it towards a mushroom that you'll bounce directly on top of. These are the pink mushrooms. They provide a little bit of a bounce. And in doing so, you'll actually quickly grab the first 2 star coins. The first one is just on top of you, but by floating down following the trail of coins that are along your way, you'll land directly on the second star coin as well as the checkpoint of the stage. And to be honest, the third star coin can be grabbed just beyond that as well. The hardest part of the stage is probably at the very end where you're just jumping between all of the mushrooms trying to make it to the flag, but even then it's fairly straightforward and very much nothing more than a simple introduction to this type of level. Now throughout the overworld map, you'll also notice some signs that have a number next to them. That's the amount of coins that you have to spend in order to unlock those paths. Remember, doing this is part of full completion. In this case, paying those star coins will give you access to the green toad house, which grants you a chance to play a little bonus game to collect some 1-ups. And don't worry, you will have plenty of lives as you run through this game. But with all that said and done, you'll be able to access 1-Tower. As you might expect, the towers basically make up what would effectively be the midpoint of each world, but they also have more use than that because they actually provide a save point as you're going through the game. So on original hardware, sometimes you actually had to beat the castle if you wanted to get to a save point and not have to repeat some of the stages when you come back to it. This is obviously very different to gaming today, where you can pretty much just pause and save at any given time when you're playing through these titles. Actually, I don't even think you need to pause and save it anymore. All this stuff just gets autosave now. And speaking of which, unlike some of the other Mario games, this game is less forgiving when it comes to collecting star coins and then losing a life. If you go through the level and grab the star coin and then make it to the checkpoint, well, you have that star coin regardless of how many lives you lose until you finish the stage. But if you do not make it to the checkpoint, or it happens to be a star coin that you collect after reaching the checkpoint, then with every single life lost, you will have to recollect that star coin again and make sure you make it to the end of the level. So you can't just do one of those trust falls where you grab the MacGuffin and then fall to your demise. But anyway, let's get back to the tower. The theming is fitting because this would effectively be 4 stages in a row now, where the themes are a direct translation in what we saw in the original Super Mario Bros. Something a bit unique about this stage, however, is that it's vertical, but that's not all that's interesting about it. As you work your way up and avoid getting squished by the blocks, as well as trying to maneuver around all of the dry bones, you can grab the first star coin fairly easily along the way. Eventually you get to this interesting little section where on the right you'll find the back end of a door, as well as a little bit of a fork. On the right you can jump up and try to avoid some spikes, and on the left there is a green pipe. Taking the path on the right will get you a star coin, but it's actually the third one. Fortunately, if you make it to the top, you can jump back down on the left path. If you hug the wall on the right side while you drop down, you can actually enter the door. So this room obviously holds the second star coin, which would give us all 3 of them, but there's also a fairly well-hidden gap on the right side of the screen. It's fairly easy to miss. I'm pretty sure when I was younger, I had to actually look this one up. It easily might have been one of the last things I discovered in this game, but it's etched in my memory even though I haven't played this game in a very long time. Now, if you were to enter this area, it's actually only part of the puzzle. What awaits you are 3 blocks that you can't break. Well, technically you can break 2 of them, but you can't break the third one. And that's because you need a blue shell. And I don't believe there's actually one available here. At least, I didn't find it. So you have to come back to this later. And since I'd like to go through this thing in the actual linear fashion, I'm also going to have the discussion on the blue shell later, because you do not get it anytime soon, and I don't want to speak about the blue shell, or the secret for that matter, until I actually uncovered it during the playthrough. That being said, we can have a little bit of a discussion on the boss fights. So once you get to the top, you face off against Bowser Jr. There are maybe 2, perhaps 3 boss fights in this game that are interesting, and even then they are extremely simple, especially if you have a power-up. For the most part though, you're either cheesing it with a bunch of fireballs, skipping under Bowser to hit a switch, or very simply jumping on top of an enemy's head 3 times without too much of a thought. The boss fights are extremely underwhelming, outside of, again, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Honestly, one of those is the final boss fight, and even that one's not that interesting. Anyway, if you show up to Bowser Jr., off to the right, there is actually a power-up, and if you already have a mushroom, then you're going to be getting a fire flower, which means once you get to Bowser Jr., you just mash the fireball button over and over again, and you'll defeat him without even moving. Pretty easy. Now you get to save your game and move on to the next half of this world. 1-4. Now, technically speaking, this is the 5th level in the game, and you go back to a green grassland theme, which is also the same theming as the first stage, and in the 5th level of the NES Super Mario Bros, you go back to the same theming as the first stage as well, so we're still on the same streak of repeating the same themes that we saw from the NES games. But I think that's just me reaching and looking for more similarities. So the cool gimmick about this stage is that it introduces you to the mini mushroom, which shrinks you down into the size of a pea. Now, I've noticed throughout the years that the mini mushroom often gets a lot of hate. No doubt it's because that makes you weaker, so if you take a single hit, that's it, it's over for you. But if you're careful and you actually know how to use it, I don't think it's that bad. Actually, I think it's one of the most enjoyable power-ups to use in this game. You're able to jump a lot further, and higher for that matter, and you can also run on the surface of water. Effectively, you become very floaty, which allows you to reach hard-to-reach places, but at the cost of losing your life in a single hit. There's also the fact that this item, while it is much more common than some of the other special items in this game, it's still relatively rare, and annoyingly required if you want to unlock certain secrets. Which means, and this will become relevant later on in this retrospective, a lot of backtracking to this stage to grab a mini mushroom, survive to the end of the stage so you can hold the mini mushroom, and then going back to whatever level it's needed so you can grab either the star coin or access the secret exit. Over here, however, it's simply an introduction. You grab the mini mushroom, you can run underneath that little area and jump down the mini pipe, grab your first star coin, and head back up to the surface. This is probably the best time to point out that I'm obviously playing this game on my PC, using the default MelonDS settings that are set up after you install everything through EmuDeck. The only major thing I did was upscale everything, so some of it could be a nicer experience. However, a lot of the textures did get left behind, as you can probably notice. But I figured that's better than just simply blowing up the original resolution of the DS a lot larger. When you're playing it in handheld, it's not bad, but when you're trying to blow it up on this screen, yeah, obviously it won't be very easy on the eyes. I had it set up so that the main top screen was blown up, with a smaller version of both screens on the right side, and I set up a hotkey so I can swap between the screens as needed, so anytime I transitioned down towards a lower level of the stage, I simply hit the trigger and that would swap things. It honestly all felt very natural unless I needed to grab an additional item by clicking the button on the bottom screen, and through most of my experience that meant taking my hands off the controller, grabbing the mouse and clicking the button very quickly. But fortunately, once I got the Steam controller, it became a lot easier because it had those built-in trackpads. Check out my alternate channel Emudine because I will no doubt have a video about using the Steam controller to get the best Nintendo DS experience on PC. If it's not uploaded at the time of you viewing this video, it will be eventually. Anyway, so after you head underground and grab that first star coin, as soon as you pop back up, you're fairly close to the midpoint of the level and you get the checkpoint. Eventually you'll get to a segment where you'll be able to grab a mushroom and get back to a larger size, which is helpful because then you gotta jump on a Koopa in order to use its shell to break down a bunch of blocks so you can access another warp pipe, which will get you the next star coin. And when you do head back above ground, if you simply move towards the right, you actually end the stage, which means you'll have to backtrack just a little bit to grab the third star coin first. And while the star coin is right in front of your face, unfortunately, if you're large, it's harder to run underneath and grab it. Instead, you'll want to run back there when you're either in mini form or even if you just take a hit, so you can easily run directly over the gap. But with that all taken care of, we can move on from this stage. When you head back into the map, you'll notice a sign that allows you to access another bonus room. This time, it's a Mega Mushroom Toad House, which will give you a Mega Mushroom that you store and can use at any time you want throughout the game. Very convenient, especially in future boss fights when you just don't feel like doing it. After that, if you pay 5 coins, you can access World 1-A, the first underwater stage. Now this will go about as you expect if you've played any 2D Mario game. Obviously the fire flower is very useful over here, not only against the Cheep Cheeps, but also against the sushi sharks. As you move forward before reaching the checkpoint, you'll find the first star coin, but if you try to hit it from underneath, you actually won't be able to grab it because invisible blocks will block your way, so you have to quickly swim around and grab it before the screen pans over, because this is an auto-scroller. I'm not going to say it's a difficult stage, but it is difficult for World 1, and that's largely because it's technically a secret area, since for new players that aren't trying to collect the star coins along their way, they may have not collected enough to even access this level. So typically the stages that are off the main path are a little bit more difficult, and that's something that I do appreciate. And just beyond the first star coin, you'll be able to access a warp pipe that will take you to the second star coin. When you head back down, there is a roulette block that will give you a random item, and in this case, I actually got my first blue shell. My immediate reaction was to try to save it for later, and that's when I realized you can't. Technically, when you're playing this game, it will not allow you to simply switch between the items you have. You also can't even use the Mega Mushroom underwater, because when I tried to do that, it just put it back in the pocket. So So unlike in other Mario games where maybe you have the Tanuki leaf and you're like, oh, I want to switch to the fire flower and switch back and forth, you can't do that in this game. It will always reserve the most powerful item in the pocket. So for example, if you have a blue shell saved and you grab another power up, it'll keep the blue shell in that spot, or like the Mega Mushroom in this case. Basically, in future levels, when you decide to head back to World 1-4 so you can grab a mini mushroom and take it on with you towards a further stage, in order to actually have a mini mushroom saved into the pocket, you gotta go through 1-4, grab the first mini mushroom, and then go through 1-4 again to grab the second mini mushroom. Now you'll have one saved, and you can use it as needed. Now, I keep saying that you have to go back to 1-4. You don't actually have to go back to 1-4, it's just the easiest stage to run through very quickly in order to grab a mini mushroom when it is needed. Anyway, when you do get to the end of the stage, you are able to grab a star coin. You gotta be quick because the screen is panning, but it's still fairly easy. Anyway, after you do beat the stage, you're able to access another Toad house, as well as head over to the right and face off against the final castle if you'd like. But obviously, we are gonna head back to the main path so we can take on 1-5 before heading to the castle. And it's another mushroom-themed stage, with the bouncy mushrooms and all. Now, something you might have noticed is that as you move through the game, you'll find these red question mark blocks with wings that are flying over different stages. If the block happens to be flying over the stage you're entering, you'll get one early on in the level as soon as you start, and it will grant you an item, typically a rare item. So like a blue shell, mega mushroom, or a mini mushroom. Sometimes it's not what you want, however, so in this case, for example, I got the mini mushroom, and I was like, I'm just not doing this. Decided to switch to a mega mushroom immediately, which helped me muscle through and grab the first star coin pretty easily. The second and third star coin, for that matter, are not any more difficult, with the second one being right along your path, and around the halfway point of the stage, there's a green warp pipe that you can head through, and by riding the mushroom in that area, you're able to grab the third star coin before dropping down below. And then it's just basically bouncing your way through the entire second half of the stage. Before moving on to the castle, you also want to spend your 5 star coins so you can access the 1-up room, since that technically is a requirement for full completion, and then we can take on our first Bowser Castle. It's honestly about what you'd expect. Through most of the stage, there will be spikes coming down from the ceiling, as well as these rope bridges that you gotta walk across, using some carefully timed wall jumps. Oh yeah, there's wall jumping in this game, as well as triple jumps and ground pounds, but I think you noticed that by now. But yeah, doing some wall jumps will get you the first star coin. After some careful maneuvering around the halfway point while jumping through the rope bridges, avoiding some dry bones as well as potaboos, the second star coin will be hidden down below with a platform that surfaces from and disappears into the lava. After you quickly grab that and move on, you might actually struggle to find a third star coin. If you have a fire flower, you will not struggle against Bowser, however. He'll immediately drop into the flames and turn into Dry Bowser. Then it's kind of funny because you still have to go and hit the switch to destroy the bridge. Now, the third star coin is actually pretty well hidden. I'm guessing most people needed a guide for this one. Near the end of stage, there is a much longer rope bridge with a warp pipe that's hidden above that you cannot see unless you're actively looking for it. Using the rope, you can actually jump high enough to get into that warp pipe. And in there, you'll find a third star coin. You can take on Bowser again, so you can head over to World 2. Which is appropriately a desert theme, just like in games like Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario 3D Land, and 3D World. Now, World 2-1 will be a fairly simple, generic desert level. The scenes in the background are pretty nice. They got a bunch of pyramids back there. Blocking your path as you move along will be pokies. Using a fire flower allows you to quickly take care of them, but if not, you also have these blocks that you can jump beneath and use those to jump over the pokies. Fairly early on along the way, you'll be able to grab the first star coin, and then you'll enter an area where there will be a ton of even longer pokies that you have to get around, while also grabbing the second star coin as you head through those. And just beyond that, towards the end of the stage, you'll notice a star coin, as well as a couple of mini pipes that you'll want to make a mental note of and come back when you have a mini mushroom. But after that, it's a pretty straight shot towards the end of the stage. Now, you do have access to a Toad house just beyond that level. I will probably stop mentioning all of the different bonus houses now because, well, you guys get the idea. But this one is a little bit relevant because I was able to grab a mini mushroom pretty quickly. So I head straight back into World 2-1 so I can access those mini pipes. And that's when I realized something that was kind of disappointing. Using that mini pipe doesn't take you anywhere. It just gives you a bonus room. So that means there will be some times where you're making a mental note as something that you need to come back to because maybe it's required for full completion, where in actuality, it doesn't matter at all. For the most part, it's kind of obvious. If you have 3 star coins already and you already know where the secret exit is, then you probably do not need to access one of those mini pipes. Otherwise, go visit 1-4 and grab your mini mushroom and come back. Now, as far as 2 is concerned, you still have the desert theme, except this time you're running on green grasslands, and this is also where Lakitu shows up, throwing down spikes and allowing you to ride his cloud if you wanted to. You'll need a mushroom in order to access the first star coin because you want to ground pound through the blocks in order to get there, and then once you collect it, you might notice that it's actually the second star coin, and that's because just a little bit further back in one of the areas where Lakitu is floating ahead, you might notice a lone coin that you can grab. It's at that point that you'll want to take over the cloud so you can fly upwards. At the top of a long string of coins is the first star coin. Further along the stage, just beyond the checkpoint, is a green pipe that's right next to a yellow one. That green pipe will shoot you upwards and allow you to enter a secret warp pipe. In that room up in the sky, you'll be able to access the final star coin. And when you drop back down, it's a straight shot to the final flag. Now, this stage does take place underground, except instead of taking place in a typical underground blue theme that you would expect from a Mario game, it actually introduces these maze-like sewer stages, which are pretty fun to get through. They have a bunch of branching paths as well as little segments where you can only really enter them in one direction. So advancing through the stage does give a little bit of a puzzle-like element. In the first fork in the road, if you wall jump upwards, you can grab the first star coin, or if you decide to ground pound on the sewer lid, you'll head further into the sewer. Moving along and traversing through various one-way segments, you'll get to an area with a piranha plant. Above that plant is the star coin, except you gotta make sure you know where to stand in order to access it. In the next area, there'll be a yellow switch that you can hit, which will increase the water level. Doing so will actually allow you to enter another area where if you're quick enough to hit the yellow switch in that stage, the water level will rise even more, and that will take you to a red flag secret exit. But obviously, before moving on from this stage, you'll want to run through it one more time so you can grab the third star coin and head to the regular exit. I do like how this secret exit is hidden. I like that it offers a little bit of a challenge in order to make sure you're quick enough to grab it. I think it's just difficult and creative enough where you can feel that sense of accomplishment when you do find it, but it's not too difficult where I'm guessing most people will actually need a guide for. And that's like the sweet spot of puzzle solving challenges that I like. In any case, getting through the remainder of the sewer will just require you to take various different paths, one of which will lead you towards a star coin. And closing off the level, you'll have to access a red switch, which will allow you to jump forward and head to the final flag. Now we can head to the stage that was unlocked after we found the first secret exit, 2-A. This is a fairly common trope in Mario. It's a platforming stage that takes place over the water, meaning there's no bottomless pit, but there is going to be a giant fish down there that's trying to eat you if you're too slow. Fortunately, the stage is generous in that it provides a lot of fire flowers, but it also does put the first star coin right in the water, making you a prime target for the big fish. After that, players can use the springs to elevate themselves and stay higher up. They can also follow the trail of coins, which will effectively keep them out of the water and safe. And in doing so, they'll actually be able to grab the second star coin. Now at the very end, and this is pretty creative, when you do hover downwards, there is a red Koopa shell before the final pipe. If you spin down on top of him, it'll bounce you up higher so you can access another warp pipe, which will give you the third star coin as well as access to the secret exit of this stage. And obviously, avoiding that Koopa and just heading to the final warp pipe will give you access to the main exit of this stage. So you'll effectively have to do this one twice. Now if you do head into that cannon, it'll fire you up towards World 5. Remember, you'll actually have to ride these cannons at least once every single time you unlock them. Fortunately, you can quickly teleport back to World 2. And by completing World 2A the way that it was intended to be completed without the secret exit, you get access to a green warp pipe which will take you right to the final boss of this world. But of course, we're going to move back, we're going to access the Mega Mushroom Toad House, and we're going to enter World 2-4. The gimmick for this stage are these yellow switches that will basically elevate a giant bump into the ground. This allows you to access the hard-to-reach places. The first star coin is actually pretty easy to spot, but it's also very easy to lose a life when you're trying to grab it. You have to make a quick wall jump, but you can easily get hit by the piranha plant. Not impossible, but very easy to lose a life. If you happen to have a mini mushroom, however, it's a lot easier to get in and out of there. Now, having that mini mushroom is also very useful because you'll be entering some narrow pathways where you have to avoid some piranha plants, and at the very end of it, you'll be able to use that mini mushroom to run on the surface of the water and access a mini pipe, which will take you to the red secret exit. A lot of secrets here. That secret exit will simply allow you to skip ahead and avoid the tower of this world. Back on the main path, you'll eventually get to a spot with a blue P-switch. You're meant to move up the cave towards the right, but if you notice that you can swim down below beneath the stage, you'll actually get access to a red warp pipe underground that will take you to the secret area above ground where you can grab the star coin and then head back towards the main path. So if you hypothetically decided to not experiment and go underneath the water, what would happen for most players is they would walk right over the star coin and realize that they don't know how to grab it, and then they gotta figure out how to get down there. It's a good puzzle. I like it. It also uses the trope of swimming beneath the stage, which is not exactly a new concept for most Mario fans. As you move along the stage, you'll eventually get to a segment where there will be two Hammer Bros trying to destroy you, and they will be protecting the third star coin, and just beyond that is the flag. I think it's wild how front-loaded this world is, by the way. Like, you did 5 worlds, and then finally you access the tower. But in fairness, there are a lot of secrets that allow you to skip ahead, and I think that's very much intentional. The tower here will have a lot of windmills that you have to ride in order to advance through the level. Compound that with hanging off of some ropes that you'll monkey bar across. You'll need to be diligent while riding the windmills because beneath one of them, in an area where there is actually no bottomless pit, you can just drop down and grab the first star coin. And then over towards the top left of that area, you might notice that there's a little spot where you can wall jump upwards, and that will take you into a room where, again, you have to wall jump on this little contraption here so that you can grab the second star coin before heading through the door. And this is where it might actually get a little bit confusing. Going through that door is technically a shortcut, so you're in the top part of this segment over here, and you might find the star coin, but you'll be unable to grab it. So you'll need to drop down and backtrack all the way to the start of the segment. Basically, as you move through this entire area, you need to hit some of these blocks that will create more of these square rotating platforms, and doing so will actually create one that will give you access towards the red pipe, which will take you to the end of the stage. But we still need that star coin, so before heading into that pipe, you might notice that you can actually wall jump between the pipe and the wall, and that will creatively give you access to the next block, which you have to hit. And doing so will spawn the blocks that you need in order to grab the star coin. Now look, I'm not gonna say this is like Legend of Zelda Dungeons level of creativity, but this is only the second world of the game, and it was around this point in time where I realized that New Super Mario Bros. Actually is very creative in how it hid some of these things. And I mean, in the case of this stage, even accessing that red pipe was a little bit of a mystery. So without even trying to think about full completion involving grabbing all of the star coins, this is still very much a level that could potentially stump somebody. Not by too much, I mean, still, regular completion is fairly easy overall, but I mean, shoot, only moving forward about 10 to 15 years, and you can feel a shift in how much simpler a lot of the secrets in this franchise get. In any case, once you do grab that star coin, you can take the red pipe upwards and go and defeat Bowser Jr. pretty easily since you have a fire flower. If you have a fire flower, of course. Now with that taken care of, we can head over to World 2-5. This is a fun stage to play with the blue shell, or at least the beginning of the stage is. It's because it's full of a lot of blocks on the ground, so if you start running and you bounce back and forth, you can destroy all those blocks. It probably won't last that long because there are a lot of enemies and hazards along the way, but it's fun nonetheless. Throughout these stages, there are these enemies that are just giant stacks of blocks basically, and you'll need to stand on top of them to reach higher areas. This can be a bit of a challenge, but it's not too difficult. The easiest star coin to grab is fairly early on. You stand on top of one of the enemies with the stacks and it'll allow you to jump upwards and grab that star coin. It might take a few attempts to figure that out, but overall it's pretty straightforward. The second star coin is easier to spot, but it's harder to nab. But it is the same concept. You just have to know which enemy to stand on top of. The annoying thing is, however, the Podoboo that's bouncing around. But if you're careful enough, one of these enemies with a stack of blocks on top of them will allow you to access this P-switch, which will give you a route directly to the star coin. But the neatest one is actually at the end of the stage. By letting your character drop down into the sand just a little bit, you'll be able to access the secret path, which will keep you on the main path, but it'll put you in a lower segment where you can grab the third and final star coin. Following that, you can just move back up, head to the final flag, and end the stage. And there's still one more until we get to the castle. 2-6. It's basically an auto-scroller. You're standing on a single platform and moving through the level, avoiding various hazards like piranha plants all over the place, being quick enough to grab star coins, and more or less just enjoying the ride and surviving to the end where you can send a piranha plant flying. Pretty funny random set piece in this game, if I'm being honest. But all in all, it's a pretty straightforward stage with nothing too much else to talk about. Now the big gimmick for the final castle is that there are a bunch of spike balls everywhere. They come in two sizes. There's the typical small one that moves a little bit faster, and then the large one which is a little bit slower. The spike balls will drop from overhead sometimes, so you gotta be careful and watch where you're going. And you can utilize various segments of the stage to hide when one of them may be passing overhead. Along your way, you'll be able to grab the first star coin by jumping up after the spike ball passes. Beyond that, entering a door will allow you to head outside where you can jump on top of some bullet bills in order to access the second star coin. And the third one will require a mini mushroom, which will be available just along your way. Now in World 2, and in World 5 for that matter, defeating the final castle with a mini mushroom will give you access to World 4 and World 6 respectively. So you'll want to beat this stage twice. One time, keep that mini mushroom and head to the end so you can access World 4, and one time regularly just so you can access World 3. The boss is actually pretty cool. It's unique. It's nothing really too difficult. You're gonna have to wall jump in order to get on top of it, especially if you're Mini Mario, but it is a nice fresh change from the usual Bowser Jr. and Bowser fights. Now obviously we'll be playing World 3 next, and typically World 4 is considered to be more difficult than World 5. So the way that I would run through this game if you're looking just for a linear difficulty that increases with every world would be to go World 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8. Basically in numerical order, except you should do World 4 after World 5. I have heard some people say that World 6 might actually be easier than World 4, so you can do those in either order if you'd like. I felt that they were fairly similar. Yeah, World 4 was about as hard as World 6, and World 7 was about as hard as World 8, with each having some levels that are potentially harder than the other. But anyway, that's kind of irrelevant right now, because after you're finished with World 2, obviously you're meant to head over towards World 3. But in my case, it was actually at this point where I realized how rare the blue shell was, so that's when I went all the way back to World 1 and I just kind of kept entering and exiting stages until one of those red blocks would give me a blue shell. Finally went and completed to level, and I went back to World 1-Tower, made sure I headed towards that secret exit, used the blue shell to bust all the blocks out of my way. Basically, when you're using the blue shell and you start running, Mario will automatically tuck into the shell so you can bounce back and forth and destroy all of those blocks that were blocking the path, time some proper jumps and destroy some other blocks along the way so you can access the red flag exit. And that will grant you access to a cannon that sends you also to World 5. But for now, let's head over to the tropical beaches of World 3. World 3 sees a very minor jump in the difficulty in comparison to what came before it. A lot of that admittedly is ramped up in the fact that it has some secret levels right at the start. In this case, if you pay 5 coins, you get access to World 3-A. It's a level that mostly takes place underwater, while it also includes the new rendition of the Skeeters, who are now reddish, pinkish, and they drop bombs on Mario. So players are going to be spending most of their time underwater trying to avoid the Skeeters dropping bombs on them, while taking advantage of the few times that a platform allows you to stay above things. There will be some minor platforming that you're required to undergo if you want to advance, like being able to jump between the revolving platforms or hitting a red switch in order to create some platforms to move on to the next segment. The first star coin isn't found until you reach beyond the checkpoint. While standing on the platform above, you'll want to guide the Skeeter towards you so that they drop the bomb downwards, creating a path that allows you to swim and grab that star coin. You'll also be granted a mini mushroom soon after that. Make sure you keep hold of it as you jump through the next barrels, and with that mini mushroom you'll be able to easily jump high enough to grab that second star coin. When you go through the warp pipe and get to the next segment, there will be a puzzle room with a star coin that's above that is basically out of reach unless you have the mini mushroom, since it will allow you to run on top of the water long enough and have a floaty enough jump that will allow you to reach it. And then finally, just beyond that, you'll be able to easily quickly access the end of the stage. Instead of moving forward, we'll head back to World 1, which takes place entirely underwater. You'll be doing the usual thing where you're swimming below and avoiding all of the cheeps. However, in this case, there will be giant purple ones that will try to eat you, one of which will be hiding a warp pipe that will give you access to the first star coin. And the second star coin will be hidden just beyond that, but if you're too slow, well, you get eaten. And that's an instant loss of a life and a requirement to restart the stage. Seems a bit excessive of a brutal punishment, but this was gaming back in the mid-2000s where they were a lot less forgiving. But once you move on from there, if you hit a P-switch, it'll uncover the location of the final star coin and you can head to the end of the stage. Beyond that is World 3-2, a stage that takes place on top of the mushrooms. The mushrooms are bobbing and weaving, and there are some platforms that you have to creatively stand on just long enough in order to advance. But up until the first checkpoint, it's fairly simple. In the next area, while the path below would have you jumping between some moving mushrooms, if you use Mario's weight and maneuver between the platforms that are above, you can grab the second star coin. After that, you'll make it to a segment where you'll have to ride a dancing mushroom forward, and if you're quick enough, you'll be able to access one of the warp pipes that are up above. Doing so will not only reward you with this room where you can fly up into the sky and grab a bunch of coins, but it will also put you in this segment over here where it actually could be pretty challenging to jump between these fast-moving mushrooms. But the reward at the end of this segment is a red flag, secret exit, which in theory would allow a player to move right past the tower, but since we have to still jump back in and go for the regular exit and grab the third star coin, it's just another box to check for us. So basically, by going back into the level and avoiding those warp pipes up above that would take you to the secret area, while remaining on a lone mushroom ride, there is the star coin that's up above that you have to quickly jump and grab before it moves on from the screen. And shortly after that is the flag to end the stage. Next up would be World 3-Tower. It's another vertical level, and you're going to be climbing a lot of cages on this one. Something I like about the Koopas that are crawling all over the cages here is that they have hazardous spikes on the bottom of their feet. I think these segments could be pretty easy, and those spikes just add a little bit of a larger hitbox to them to make players have to be a little bit more careful as they maneuver through the course. Over on the left side of the opening area, if Mario was to perform a wall jump, he could grab the first star coin. And then as you climb above while avoiding various stage hazards and using Koopas to break specific blocks, which is especially necessary if you want a mushroom so you can ensure that you're a larger form of Mario. It'll make it a lot easier to traverse through this stage and grab the second star coin. Eventually, over in the top left corner of the stage, on the top of this segment, there will be multiple doors up above. They effectively take you to the same room, it just depends on which path you took to get up there. The challenge definitely picks up over here. There are a lot more spikes, a lot more Koopas. Players gotta be a lot slower and more careful as they traverse, and it's very easy to make the wrong move and lose a life. Now, in my case, I continued to move upwards, finish a stage, beat Bowser Jr. without a thought, and completed it, only to realize that I missed the third star coin. And it's because at the top of the first section, it's the two doors on the top left that will take you to the same room. If you hug the wall on the right and traverse upwards, there's a third door that will give you access to a secret area where you need to hit a red switch and climb up as fast as possible, which honestly is a lot easier said than done, but at the top, what awaits you is the third star coin, and then you'll be able to access the fight with Bowser Jr. After that, we can head down to World 3-B, a stage in the sky that takes place on top of a bunch of warp pipes with a whole bunch of piranha plants going at you. Now, right before you enter this stage, you do have access to a Mega Mushroom bonus house, which I found pretty useful because there's a star coin that's hidden just below some blocks that you can't destroy. And I think technically what you're supposed to do is find out which warp pipe would give you access to a bonus room that would give you access to the pipe below that would allow you to grab that star coin. But I just used my Mega Mushroom so I can break those blocks and grab the first star coin. The second star coin is just beyond that in an area where it seems like you might need a mini mushroom in order to reach it, especially because it's being hinted at with the mini pipes that it's sitting on. But in actuality, just to the left of that, you can do some wall jumps, which will give you access to that star coin. And then finally, as you move forward and avoid a flurry of piranha plants that are just doing everything they can to slow you down, you can quickly grab the third star coin if you're safe enough and head to the flag. And that flag will give you access to World 3-C, taking place on platformers just above the water, with a giant fish swimming down below that's ready to nibble at you any chance that it gets. Early on, some collapsible platforms will drop down and allow you to grab the first star coin if you're quick enough. And then just after the checkpoint, you're gonna have to be very quick, swim downwards, perform some wall jumps, and grab the star coin before the fish destroys you yet again. Fortunately, just beyond that, there is a P-switch that you can hit, which will give you access to an invincibility star to make the next segment a lot easier. But as you make it to the end of the stage, you'll get to a point where you'll realize that you cannot reach that final star coin. Now, hypothetically, if you had a mini mushroom, you'd be able to reach it, but what you're actually supposed to do is circle back and head into the red pipe that was up above, assuming you didn't collect the coins when activating the P-switch. And that'll take you out just on top of the third star coin, where you'll drop down and grab it and head to the flag. Similar to before, this will grant players access to the end of this world, but obviously we're going to be circling back to World 3-3, another one that takes place entirely underwater. In addition to the usual Cheep Cheeps, players will also be avoiding the bloopers. But you'll also need to be diligent in your search for this one, as this stage does get pretty deep. For example, the first star coin takes place in a location that you might think is a bottomless pit, but you gotta drop down deep enough in order to grab the first star coin. But down there will also be a yellow switch that you'll need to strike and swim upwards as fast as you can so you can move over to the next section over and enter the area down there if you want to head to the secret section, which can be accessed by going into the third warp pipe in this long chain of warp pipes. In this section, all the way in the bottom right corner is the second star coin, and in the top right corner, when you exit that area, you'll head back to the main path. Now, the exit will be at the top right with a giant arrow pointing right towards it, but if you ignore that and you drop down below between all of the warp pipes, you can grab the third star coin. However, the catch is that as soon as you do grab that star coin, you're going to be chased by a bunch of bloopers. So you gotta get back up there as fast as possible so you can access the ending flag. Which brings us to World 3-Ghost House. This is fun. You guys know this by now, but I love ghost houses. All of the searching for secret exits, the puzzle solving to even just advance and beat it normally, and some of the creativity behind how the star coins are hidden. One of the big gimmicks for this stage is that you have to hit specific switches in order to move up some stairs, otherwise you'll just slide right back down. There will also be doors along the way that take you effectively nowhere. However, at the end of one of the areas, there will be a door that gives you access to the first star coin, which you'll need to bounce on the head of some of these Goombas that are wearing some jack-o'-lanterns on their head in order to reach it. And just outside that door is a switch which will give you access to a stairs up above. Jumping up those stairs and moving towards the left, you can get the second star coin, and then going back and hitting the switch again, and this time moving to the right, you'll get access to another switch that if you hit it will make a door spawn. Going through that door will move you to the next area. Now, fortunately for me, I found a roulette block right here that gave me access to a blue shell, and I didn't even realize it was necessary because when I made it to the end of the next section, I needed that blue shell to access the third star coin. If I did not grab that blue shell, I'd have to have made a return to this stage later. But after grabbing that star coin, I was able to reach the final flag. However, this is a ghost house, which means there is a secret exit. And it's actually a bit of a speed platforming challenge. In the section over here where you hit the yellow switch and run back towards the left to enter the door, instead of going into the first door that appears in front of you, you're going to want to run all the way back up and down again to where that first switch was, and you'll notice that there are 2 doors now where there once was 1. That door initially took you to the first star coin, but the second one requires you to be extremely quick and access before it disappears. I'm not kidding when I say that it took me about 10 tries in order to be fast enough to access that door, but fortunately, once you do access it, you can grab the red exit flag. And doing so will let you enter the cannon that'll blast players off to World 6. But of course, we're moving right back down to World 3. We still have to beat World 3 Castle. Thematically appropriately, this stage takes place over a small little puddle of water, but it is still a Bowser Castle at the end of the day. There are giant spikes slamming down and up from above and below, and if you're careful, you can grab the first star coin before one of them crushes you. On top of a womp is the second star coin, but you can't actually access it by standing on his head. Instead, you're meant to move beyond it and enter through the ceiling above, run back, and drop down and grab it. After that is just more careful traversals through the stage while avoiding the giant spikes. And just before the boss fight, there's a bit of a challenge where if you're careful enough, you can grab the final star coin and head into the boss fight. The boss is fairly unique. It's a giant fish that'll jump up from below you. The added Cheep Cheeps do make it a bit more challenging than otherwise. It's still not a ridiculously difficult boss fight by any means, but it did cost me a life, which is rare for this game. So I will give them bonus points for that. I did come back with a fire flower, however, so it was much easier the second time around. And since World 4 is technically a secret world in this game, when you beat World 3, it'll take you to World 5. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to do this in a proper difficulty curve order. World 4 is harder than World 5, so I moved on straight to World 5 at this point, and I circled back to World 4 next. Which means we're done with the tropical area of World 3, and now we're in the snow and ice area of World 5. And just like with the previous world, you get a nice little jump in difficulty. Although the true jump forward doesn't really start until you hit Worlds 4, 6, and 7. But World 5-1 is a good place to start. I mean, gosh, I took a hit as soon as I started the stage. Aside from the fun wintry visuals, there are also gimmicks where you will struggle to jump through deep snow, as well as branches on trees that are filled with snow that will drop down onto Mario when you pass underneath. And one of those spots will have a star coin where you need to jump on a block next to it in order to reach it. Through most of the stage, there are these enemies that are throwing snowballs at you as well. And just beyond the checkpoint, there will be the second star coin, but in order to grab it, you either have to jump carefully on top of a Koopa, or hit the block with wings that's coming by in order to stop it so that you can reach the star coin by jumping on top of it. Finally, the third one is pretty easy to grab. You just have to carefully avoid another one of those enemies that's throwing a snowball at you, and you can also use the blocks that will multiply as you hit them from below. After surviving the onslaught of enemies, you'll have a straight shot to the corner flag, and I always found it funny that if you continue to run forward and jump straight to the flag, the snow from the tree will drop you down to your knees. But if you quickly get back up, grab the flagpole, you can head to the next stage. By paying 5 coins, you'll be able to access 5-A. And again, since this is a secret stage that's veered off the main path, it's actually a little bit more difficult. Most of the stage takes place on top of these mushroom platforms that become wider and shrink down to a smaller size. And by carefully maneuvering through them right around the halfway point of the stage, you can grab the first star coin and use a red switch to get back to the platforms. Just beyond that, if you hit a block from below, it'll create a vine that will climb up to the sky. If you do time it right and climb up that vine, you'll enter a bonus area which will get you the second star coin. And finally, back on the main path just before you hit the final corner flag, if you drop down between 2 mushrooms when they contract, you can grab the star coin. After that, we can take on 5-2, which takes place underground. There are some very narrow pathways here with mostly spike tops that you have to avoid, and you're also going to have to be pretty careful with this one because the icy floor will cause Mario to slip. Along your way, you'll eventually make it to a bunch of warp pipes that are up on the ceiling. By avoiding the piranha plants and smashing some blocks, you'll be able to grab the first star coin. But you do have to be careful because if you take a hit, you'll be too small to grab that star coin, since you'll be unable to break the blocks. Which honestly does provide a minimal challenge, believe it or not. There are enough hazards in this stage where I took a hit at least 3 times by the time I actually made it to those blocks while I was large. Now, just beyond that little puzzle, there's a spring that you can jump on in order to grab the second star coin, except you'll notice that it's actually the third star coin. And that's because you'll want to take the spring just back to the 2 pipes that are overhead, and use the spring to enter the yellow pipe. Doing so will put you in a bonus area where a carefully timed wall jump will give you the third star coin. After that, it's a straight shot to the end of the stage in theory, but there is still a lot of careful traversal because there are a whole bunch of enemies and stage hazards along the way to make sure that it's not simply just pressing right and jumping to access the end of the stage. I got through that portion without losing a single life, but it was very careful traversal. Now, if you notice, between 5-2 and 5A, there is a green pipe on the map, so that obviously implies that somewhere along this world there is a secret exit. And if you go back into 5-2, you'll notice a pipe that's up above, and it's a bit harder to reach just because of the hazards along the way, but if you do enter it, you'll get to the red flag and unlock the secret exit, which would allow a player to skip the secret tower, but we're going to move right back to it. This is a trope that's fairly common in the Mario world, another vertical stage that's going up the tower. In this case, you'll be riding an elevator that's moving upwards while avoiding these spike balls that are just slamming all over the place and trying to knock you down. The star coins will be along your way, they'll be easy to spot, but they will be difficult to grab, and that's mostly because of the non-stop nature of the stage. It's very easy to take a hit on this one, but it's also pretty easy to grab power-ups along the way in order to stay alive. I did lose a life or 2 on this one, and it was mostly because of the tight spaces that I had to jump through in order to grab the star coins. In any case, I did eventually make it to Bowser Jr., and I had a fire flower when I got there, so that was a nothing battle. Without the fire flower, the ice platform would have been slippery, but alas, I did not have to deal with that. Beyond that, however, I did decide to head straight towards 5B, which does take place on top of a bunch of slippery ice. Most of the stage will require you to avoid Koopas and Goombas, as well as these enemies that will charge towards you, and because of how slippery everything is, it's actually very easy to take a hit on this one, even lose a life. At some point early on, you'll be able to drop below and grab the first star coin, and just beyond the checkpoint, you'll be able to jump straight above and grab the second star coin, admittedly after hitting a P-switch and making your way there before the coins disappear. After that, the third star coin takes place in a fork in the road where an enemy is defending it, but it's pretty easy to grab otherwise. And with that, you can wrap up the stage and head on to 5-C. This one also takes place underground, except there's a lot less ice down here. Players will mostly be required to avoid blue beetles that'll drop from the ceiling and slide towards you, as well as these bruisers that will slam their way across everything in order to attack. I'll be honest, at the very beginning of the level, I had a Mega Mushroom that I just decided to use, and I was able to grab the first star coin without even realizing it. And then to grab the second star coin, I was actually able to use a beetle shell. Otherwise, I don't think there'd be another way to grab it. After that is the checkpoint, and if you hit a red switch, it'll make a bunch of blocks continually start to spawn in front of you, and by avoiding all of the bruisers above, you'll be able to access the end of the stage. Now, this is 5-C, so clearly there's some kind of a secret exit that we missed. We also only have 2 star coins, so we're heading right back into it. Sure enough, just beyond the checkpoint, you'll get to an area where there are 4 blocks. Hitting one of them will spawn a vine that will go upwards, and it takes you all the way up to the sky, where you'll carefully have to avoid getting hit by a bruiser so that he can slam the blocks that are blocking the third star coin. Do not accidentally shoot the bruiser with the fire flower like I did. Otherwise, you just gotta do it all again. After that, you can comfortably exit the stage. No red flag in this one, just the secret star coin. Circling back, now we can go to World 5-3. Another level that takes place entirely on top of ice. I did have a blue shell at the start of this one, so that was fun. By quickly sliding around and jumping at the right time, I was able to grab the first star coin, and then when I dropped down way below, I noticed a mini warp pipe that I'd have to come back to once I was Mini Mario. Just beyond that segment, there's another vine that will take you up above, and climbing that vine will allow you to skip part of the level and actually drop down right to where the third star coin is. If you don't climb that vine just to the right of it, there's a space that you can run towards and crouch so that Mario can slide beneath. You can do those mini hop jumps while you're crouched too, so you can move forward, and you're actually going to have to be in a larger form, otherwise you can't break the blocks that will give you access to the star coin. Once again, with that collected, you can move on to the end of the stage, which gives you access to a ghost level, or a haunted house. The most common enemy you'll be seeing here is yet more bruisers that are just punching their way forward trying to slow you down. You'll also want to lure them throughout the stage so they can break bricks along the way, and doing so fairly early on in the level will allow you to wall jump up a segment so you can collect the first star coin. Just beyond that, there's a door that's a little bit hard to reach, and going into that door, you'll be met with a nice surprise. A whole bunch of bruisers just swinging their way at you, and if it catches you off guard, you will very likely lose a life pretty early on. Second time around, I did take a hit, but I had a mushroom, so I was fine. I was able to grab the second star coin. Now this is a haunted house, so even the regular completion could get confusing. Even if you're not looking for anything secretive, the way forward is actually to go back and stand on top of blocks and crouch downwards and jump up. In that little space over there is a hidden vine. Climbing that vine and avoiding the bruiser along the way will give you access to the door that takes you to the next section. Over here is an elevator that shoots straight up into the sky after it wobbles a bit. The problem is if a player is not paying attention and hugging the right side of the wall, which on a first time visit will probably happen, the elevator will take you straight up to the top. Entering the door on your left will actually give you access directly to the red flag, which is the secret exit, which I found funny because I was unintentionally able to find a secret exit before finding the main exit. Grabbing that flag will give you access to the cannon in this stage, which shoots players over to World 8. But we're heading back to the ghost house because we still need a third star coin as well as the regular exit. Now in the part where the elevator shoots directly upwards, you have to hug the right side of the wall, you'll enter a pathway to the right, you'll be able to grab the third star coin, and of course after that you get to the red flag, which meant for me at least, I did have to find the main exit. In any case, I decided to jump upwards and that takes you to another one of those elevators, only this one takes you to the main exit of the stage, which puts us in the penultimate stage of this world, 5-4. An auto-scroller, with mushroom platforms that will either drop downwards or move upwards when you stand on them. They won't drop entirely, you'll have to just do a few hops if you want to keep them balanced. So naturally, while moving through most of the stage, players will be hopping quite a bit. They'll also be avoiding Koopas and bullet bills, as well as doing their best to use a mushroom that raises themselves high enough so they can reach the first star coin. Interestingly enough, the second star coin is just beyond the path there, but you'll have to have a mini mushroom in order to reach it. Or you can head back downwards if you're fast enough and use the mushroom to get up there and run and grab it before moving on in the auto-scroller. So fortunately, you will not have to do this level again to grab that second star coin, but only if you're quick enough. Beyond that is the checkpoint, and once again, after a series of challenges jumping between the mushrooms, you can access the final flag in order to get to the castle stage of this world. The big gimmick of 5-Castle are the conveyor belts with the piranha plants sitting on top of them. Typically, the star coins will be along your way, especially the first one, but the stage does require careful maneuvering in order to grab the star coins while avoiding the conveyor belts that are pushing you directly into the piranha plants. A fire flower is very useful in this one since you can't defeat the piranha plant otherwise. Eventually, you'll get to a series of enemies, mostly dry bones, that will be heading towards you. In between them, a spring will spawn, and by jumping on top of that spring, you can grab the second star coin. And the third one is actually pretty well hidden. Near the end of the stage is a singular block that's actually pretty hard to jump on top of. I think technically a player is supposed to grab the spring and take it there, but since I got there without the spring, I decided to just try over and over again until I got on top. Doing so will allow Mario to run on top of the stage where they can drop downwards, grab the third star coin, and head to the boss fight, which sees you take on the evil piranha plant, the same one that we saw in Super Mario Sunshine, otherwise known as Petey Piranha. And just like in Mario Sunshine, Petey will fly overhead, slam down on top of you, you'll have to avoid him, and if you have a fire flower, you can just unload a bunch of fireballs on him in order to beat the stage. Now, seemingly World 5 is complete, but there are still a few things we need to check off. There's still the matter of green pipes in this world, which means a secret exit was missed. And it's actually way back in 5-2 and requires a blue shell. This one's actually pretty well hidden. As you move through the stage, there'll be a section where you can wall jump in order to move on top of the stage. If you run on the roof towards the left, eventually you'll hit a dead end which has blocks. So if you have managed to notice that, and if you have a blue shell, you can take advantage and use the blue shell in order to break those blocks out of the way, and that'll give you access to the red flag. But that's still not all that's left in World 5. Since defeating World 5 will take you to either World 6 or World 7, that means we'll have to go back and grab a mini mushroom and come back and do this final stage one more time, defeating Petey Piranha again, only this time being very careful because we do not have a fire flower and will lose a life in a single hit. It's the same idea, he'll slam down, you'll have to avoid him, only in order to damage him, you'll have to ground pound on top of him. 3 hits, and we are done with World 5. And now that we have access to both World 6 and World 7, we're going to move backwards and head back to one of the more challenging worlds in the game, the secret that is the toxic forest of World 4. In Super Mario Bros. On the DS, Worlds 1, 2, 3, and 5 had a pretty good progressive difficulty curve. But it's in Worlds 4, 6, 7, and 8 where the game starts to respect you. This is not all that uncommon in the 2D Mario franchise. In pretty much every game prior to New Super Mario Bros., whether it's the titles on the NES or even in Super Mario World, you'll eventually get to a point where it's like, oh, like this game actually wants me to try now. Where you can tell that those that were designing the stages actually respect you and understand that you do not need your hands held in order to complete the title. And the funny thing is over here, it's felt immediately at World 4-1. The thing is, when it comes to World 4-1, I not only enjoy the stage, but I also enjoy the visuals. Whether it's the purple of the toxic pool below or the background with the trees, it feels a lot less generic than some of the other worlds that we've gone through so far. Throughout most of this stage, there will be spiders that drop down from up above. You can either jump on top of them to move forward, or use the Koopa shells to knock them out of your way. The first star coin will be hidden on top between two of them, and when you move just beyond that, you'll be able to take a ride on Dory, who will keep you safe from the purple toxic waste. Early on in the ride, you can actually jump to the top of Dory's head in order to access a platform up above, so you can use that to get to the second star coin by jumping on the back of the spiders. And as you move forward just beyond that, if you're completely lucky like me and you jump on top of these blocks, you might accidentally uncover a secret vine that you can climb upwards. This will give you a little challenge where you can jump on top of the back of some spiders in order to access the red secret exit. Grabbing said exit will allow you to skip straight to the tower of this world. But for now, we'll move back to World 4-1 so we can find a third star coin and the main exit. At the end of the Dory ride, there will be an area where you're jumping on platforms that will fall downwards. Using a Koopa shell, you can actually just throw it downwards and it'll grab the third star coin before you exit the stage. Easy enough. We can head to World 4-2 now. This one takes place in mushrooms up in the sky, except over here there are the addition of these purple mushrooms, which will lean towards the direction that you're standing. At the midpoint of the stage, a player will be able to wall jump and grab the first star coin, and then just beyond that, by standing on the right side of the purple mushroom, they can grab the second star coin. Finally, near the end of the stage, you might notice a lone brick that you can break. If you move over towards the right and head underneath it, hitting it from down below will spawn a vine that you can climb up. Climbing said vine will take you up to the sky where you can hit another vine, and that will take you to the third star coin before exiting the stage, allowing you to head towards World 4-3. Which puts us in an auto-scroller underwater. Along with all of the usual things that always apply in these water levels, having the fire flower is very useful, avoiding the cheap cheeps is necessary, but in addition to all of that, you'll also have to avoid the giant eels that will be taking up more than half of the screen sometimes. Fairly simple for the most part, but you gotta be very quick as you move through the stage because not only do you have to avoid all of the enemies, you also have to quickly grab the star coins before the screen pans on. For the first star coin, it's only about the speed, but for the second star coin, you actually have to sneak in between two eels and make sure you get out of there before they bite at you. The third one is actually even harder. I missed it the first time around. There's a yellow switch that you can hit that'll turn off the pressure that's coming out of the warp pipes that's stopping you from going down. And if you're quick enough and you swim to the last warp pipe in the lineup down below, you'll be able to drop down into a secret area and grab the third star coin. Still pretty hard to get to the end of this one. I did lose a few lives and had to repeat everything over again. But eventually, if you're careful enough, you can access the end of the stage and head to the Tower of World 4. Once again, since it's a tower, it's another vertical one. In the beginning, you'll be working your way up, jumping on top of platforms that are trying to crush you, and then you'll get to a segment where you have to climb up the cages as fast as you can while the lava below is rising up. The star coins will be along your path, oftentimes requiring you to make very quick maneuvers, whether it's jumping through the cages or shimmying quickly into hard-to-reach places while avoiding the hazards. And it just kind of picks up the difficulty in the second half. Along the way, you have to grab the third star coin before the lava gets upwards, and then move back around to the left side of the screen and just continue to climb upwards between all of the cages. When you do make it up to Bowser Jr., it will be pretty challenging if you do not have a fire flower. Not the worst challenge, mind you. Basically, you don't jump on top of him, you wait for him to throw a green shell on you, and you have to quickly time jumping on top of the green shell, grab that, and hit him with it. But hey, it's a little bit more challenging than just jumping on his head 3 times, so there's that. Anyway, after that, you can unlock 4-A, but in my case, I decided to go straight towards 4-4. Similar to the Toxic Forest stages from Super Mario World, over here there are a lot of wigglers that are all around. And once again, if you jump on top of them, they will turn red, get angry, and continue to charge around. But they're also useful to bounce on top of if you need to reach higher places. At some point in a segment down below, you can actually get down there and grab the star coin. The best practice here would be to use the Koopa shell to knock out the wiggler that's in the way. And then just beyond that, by accessing an area that's up above, you can spawn another vine that you can climb upwards, and time your jump off of the vine to grab the second star coin. Now, I did kind of appreciate this. It might have been a skill issue, but because of how high Mario jumps and exactly where that star coin is positioned, you can't actually just climb to the top of the vine and jump to the left and grab the star coin. Instead, you need to jump from a little bit lower, wall jump, and then grab the star coin. Which sounds mundane, but if you don't know that ahead of time, you will very likely fall down to the bottom and take a hit from the wiggler. So it's just like a small example of something that should be simple, that they've made a little bit more challenging, and I think the game is better for those minor adjustments. Especially especially because this is the second half of the game where a player should expect to be a little bit more tested. Either way, it's not the biggest level design revelation, it's actually not even that big of a deal, but as you move on forward, the pathways are narrow and the enemies are aplenty, so you do need to be careful. Especially when grabbing the third star coin, instead of simply just reaching down and grabbing it, carefully sliding down the wall and performing a wall jump is the best way to grab it, if you don't have a Koopa shell. Once again, it's a minor tweak, but newcomer Mario fans, even young gamers, should definitely experience these kind of minor jumps in difficulty to make the platforming more exciting as you move through the game. Finally, by bouncing on top of the Wigglers and / or the Koopas, you'll be able to make your way to the end of the stage. And now we will head to 4-A. Aside from the toxic pool down below, you'll spend most of this stage either jumping on vines that you can use to swing across, or hopping between platforms that will turn a wheel and allow you to advance through the level. There's a lot of jumping in this one, and it's all about figuring out how to get beyond the toxic pool. When you do eventually reach the checkpoint, you can jump on another wheel that'll take you forward, and by jumping off of the platform that's at the highest point when you're just below the start coin, you'll be able to grab that. Moving forward, if a player is careful, they can jump on top of a flying Koopa, which will give them access to a vine up above. Swinging across said vine will allow them to enter a warp pipe. This will give them access to the second star coin in between a bunch of blue blocks. And just outside of that area, a player will access a swinging vine. When they jump across it, there will be 3 pipes, and entering one of those pipes will take them down underground where the third star coin awaits. Obviously, while doing all of this, they're still being careful to avoid the purple toxic waste, as well as the piranha plants that are coming out of the pipes. In any case, that should take them straight to the end of the level. So now we are at World 4-Ghost House, or Haunted Mansion. Now for this stage, at least at the start, it's very horizontal. You'll be moving forward and jumping between platforms over bottomless pits while avoiding boos. Eventually, there'll be a funny looking platform that you can jump on that'll swing you right across the stage. And if you climb up after doing that, it'll take you to a little pathway that'll lead you to the first star coin. Using the same funny looking platform just next to it, you can swing to the other side, and a red switch will give you access towards a door. That door takes you into a room with a giant boo. Over to the left is a red switch. Using that red switch, you can access the next star coin by performing some wall jumps. Mind you, as you're going through this one, there are multiple routes in almost every single segment, so while it seems straightforward as I'm recounting it, most players will be making a lot of wrong turns and backtracking. This is a ghost house after all, which means by nature it is a maze. Now by hitting the red switch, you'll be able to enter a warp pipe, and that'll move you up to the top of the level. But you also might notice that there's an area up ahead that you can't quite reach, which means we're coming back to this one with a mini mushroom later. Still, if you advance through the stage, eventually you'll make it to a door, and that will give you access to the exit. And if you are diligent enough, you can find the blocks that will allow you to get to the top of the flag, even though it's not really required in this game. Now, re-entering the stage with a mini mushroom, you can get on top of that same warp pipe from earlier. This time, however, you can use the massive jump in order to access the area up above where you can wall jump and get the final star coin. But also, when you do exit through the door, it won't take you to the main exit, it will take you instead to a red flag secret exit, which will grant players access towards a cannon that will also shoot them towards World 7. Which I think is pretty neat because World 7 and World 4 are the 2 secret worlds of this game, so if you're able to enter World 4, and you don't really care about full completion, you can get to World 7 without having to beat the World 5 boss with a mini mushroom again. Not as relevant to me since we're going for full completion, but still cool nonetheless. After that, we can head straight into World 4-5, which is a stage that takes place underground. Funnily enough, the mushrooms are also underground here. But the bigger gimmick is utilizing the bombs to clear the pathway as you move through the stage. In some cases, this is a lot easier said than done. I always feel like throwing these things a little bit harder than it should be. They bounce around pretty easily, and giving them the slightest touch will make them bounce forward as well, so you can't just simply place them down without being too careful. Overall, it's pretty finicky, especially when you have a limited number of bombs that you need in order to break certain blocks that will give you access to the star coins. So in my case, I found that I would quickly jump to my demise over and over again every time I messed up the bombs. The second star coin is a little bit easier. You just have to hit the bomb from below and it'll clear a path so you can jump up and grab this coin. And for the third one, it's a bit creative in that there's a swinging bridge that you have to stand on top of and then place the bomb down at the very bottom so it can blow up the platform that is blocking a warp pipe. After you enter that warp pipe, you need to use the bombs in order to clear a pathway towards the star coin, which hopefully by this time most players have better control of their bombs, or at least placing them down where they want them to be. I still lost quite a few lives just in this area alone because I kept putting the bomb down in the wrong spot, which meant going back to the checkpoint, which meant having to grab all 3 star coins over and over again, which, as you would expect, was very annoying. But anyway, after that is World 4-6. There's a giant dory that you're riding in the beginning of this level. Just like in previous games, ground pounding the dory will make its head bow downwards. For the first star coin, when Dory bows down to go beneath a platform, you'll jump on top of it and quickly grab the star coin and head back to Dory before it moves on without you. And a similar concept will happen later on after the checkpoint, where you'll need to make sure you're standing on top of the head of Dory so that you can access the platform higher up and hit the P switch so you can easily grab the star coin before Dory moves on beyond. Finally, Dory will travel below a bunch of warp pipes with piranha plants that are frequently coming out of it. You have to be very quick, but as soon as you get past those piranha plants, there's a red switch up on the ceiling. Hitting those switches will spawn a red platform. And that platform will give you access to a warp pipe, which takes you to a secret area where you can grab the third star coin before finally heading towards the end of this stage. Which means now it's time to take on the Bowser stage of World 4. And there's a whole lot of swinging in this one. The platforms will move back and forth and you'll want to jump on them as they move towards the right so you can land on the next platform. And in this case, you'll have to jump when it's at its peak towards the right so you can reach the first star coin. Beyond that, you'll have to avoid some thwomps as you make it through the stage. I did feel like I was unfairly tricked by the level because by wall jumping, I was rewarded with an invincibility star, which allowed me to defeat a giant thwomp, except I needed that thwomp so that it could destroy the platforms that were below it. So I simply decided to fall into the lava. Sure enough, beneath that giant thwomp is the second star coin. After that, as you move forward, you'll make it to the checkpoint. From here, the third star coin sits below a swinging platform. And while it is challenging to jump between all of the swinging platforms at the very end, it is straightforward. So as long as you're careful, you'll be able to make it to the next fight, which is against a giant Goomba. The trick here is to avoid the Goomba and the little gaps in the ground that allows it to run over you. You'll hit a yellow switch, and it will spawn a platform over towards the side of the stage. Jumping on the platform will raise you up above the Goomba where you can ground pound on top of its head 3 times and it's defeated. Pretty easy, but still creative and somewhat unique, I guess. Slim pickings here, okay? The boss fights are not all amazing in this game. Actually, they're mostly underwhelming to be honest, but that could be said about a lot of Mario titles. Now that being said, with World 4 complete, and since we already completed World 5 below, we can head straight to World 6. So similar to World 4, this one is a step above in difficulty compared to World 5. I don't think it's necessarily more challenging than World 4, but it's definitely as challenging as World 4, and I think World 4 was definitely way more challenging than everything that came below, by quite a big margin. The other reason that this one is unique is because it actually contains 2 tower stages, which I believe is the only world in the entire game to have that. And believe it or not, there are also no secret exits in the entirety of this world. It is a pure challenge, that's all it is. Remember, for the casual player, the way that they would play this game is they would go World 1, World 2, World 3, World 5, and now World 6. So for a lot of them, this is going to be the second last world before the end of the game. And I personally think this one has just a pure platforming challenge to it that makes it very exciting as a final challenge before getting to the end of the game. It also has the added bonus of taking place in the Rocky Canyon's mountain-like terrain, which visually might be pretty dull in comparison to World 4 that came before it. But the cliffside angle of it was pretty cool for the time, especially because this is the first game to utilize that, the first 2D Mario game to utilize that, I should say. But yeah, it took me a whole hour and a half to get through this one. So let's jump right into it with 6-A. As soon as this one starts up, you'll be met with Lakitu. Avoiding the enemies that he's throwing at you, you'll eventually make it to a whirlwind tornado of sand that you can utilize to be sent up into the sky and torpedo your way downwards in order to grab the first star coin. You'll be traversing through this one while avoiding various hazards along the way, mostly enemies and Lakitus and tornadoes and sinking sand. Eventually, you'll get to a segment with a yellow warp pipe down in the middle. That warp pipe will take you to a secret room where you'll get the next star coin. And of course, in my case, I noticed that it was the third one. And it's because collecting the second one requires you to allow yourself to sink down into the sand over here in this mound that's sticking upwards. Doing so warps you underground where you can grab the final star coin and head to the end of the stage. If I'm being completely honest, I think that second star coin is probably the most interesting aspect of this entire stage. Otherwise, it's kind of underwhelming. Heading back to 6-1, however, I think it's a lot more enjoyable. Most of this one takes place over on the cliffs. You'll either be shimmying across them with your back against the wall or hanging down below. And it all depends on where the bullet bills are at any given time. Because there are a lot of bullet bills in this one, and it'll start off as soon as you begin the stage. Keeping your eyes peeled, you'll pretty easily notice the first star coin where a quick wall jump will allow you to grab it, and in a similar fashion you'll be able to pick up the second star coin as well. Really, it's just a matter of survival around this one. The bullet bills will slow you down as much as they possibly can, and just before you reach the final flag, you can grab a star coin down below, which now grants you access to World 6-2. This stage takes place with a little bit of a water theme, but has the neat little mountains in the background too. As you head through this one, the water level will be rising and sinking. So depending on where the tides are at any given time, it'll determine what you can and can't grab. Eventually, you'll make it to a very tall green pipe that'll shoot you up into the sky, and at the very end of a pretty long bonus area, you might notice that you had taken a very long shortcut and skipped most of the level. So you'll need to backtrack just a little bit to grab the second star coin, and then if you head back to the main path and you grab an invincibility star, in a specific moment where the water level drops down, you'll be able to run past all of the enemies to grab the third star coin before ending the stage, and then heading back into it, where in the very beginning there was actually a secret vine that we missed that allows you to climb upwards and use a P-switch to access the first star coin. Similar to 6-A, this stage is also very straightforward, but it is that one star coin that can keep you searching for quite a while, at least it did for me. And it's a challenge that I thoroughly appreciated. After that, you get to the first tower. You're climbing upwards and the giant spikes are coming out from the walls on either side. The paths are narrow, it's going to require a lot of quick traversal, including making very risky runs in order to grab the star coins, like the first one over here. It's the same concept all throughout, but it just gets more difficult as you move up the tower. More spikes, narrower areas, giant dry bones in the way, and having to be very quick to grab the second star coin before heading into the final room where the boss door is. Now, if you can carefully time it, without using a mini mushroom, you can actually make it to the platform above and access the warp pipe. But it does require almost perfection. I was able to do it pretty easily the first time, but for some reason, after I lost my life, the second time was a lot more challenging. Ideally, I would have not needed to do it twice, but the problem is when you enter that room, there are a whole load of spikes that immediately fly out from the walls, so it's very easy to quickly lose a life if you're not paying attention. And the thing is, even going through it twice, you might still make a mistake because the pattern is basically once the spikes move, you have to run up, grab the coin, then you have to run to the middle platform, and then you head to the bottom. Trying to rush any part of that room too quickly will cost you your life. Fortunately, taking on Bowser Jr. is a lot easier once you do achieve that accomplishment, which means you can head into World 6-3. Now, prior to entering that, you are granted a Mega Mushroom, and if you use the Mega Mushroom at the very beginning of the stage, you'll be able to tear through just a whole bunch of warp pipes, and you'll come out of it on the other side with the first and the third star coin. Unfortunately, however, one of the warp pipes that you knocked down actually was the path towards the second star coin, so you are going to have to do the stage again. You're supposed to head into the red pipe that takes you underground so that you can access the next area, and then once you are in that next area, there's a series of warp pipes that you just quickly drop in and out of until you find the one that takes you to the next segment. One of those warp pipes will give you the second star coin, and once you get beyond that whole area, you'll just be doing that same puzzle that you did the first time around, with some very careful platforming across narrow pathways as you work your way towards the flag. Bringing us to 6-4. Once again takes place in the mountains on the cliffs, only this time instead of bullet bills there are flaming fireballs to avoid. Similar to the earlier stage, it's all about knowing when to hang off of the cliff or when to shimmy across it, and likewise if you're diligent enough as you go through, you should be able to spot and collect all 3 star coins pretty easily. It's just a matter of wall jumping in the right locations to grab them. The final area can be seen as a minor puzzle. There are effectively 2 different warp pipes that you can enter to head to the final segment. Climbing up the side of the mountain to the top pipe will get you to the path where you can collect the third star coin before heading to the end of the stage and moving on to the second tower of World 6. This one brings back the conveyor belts, and obviously it's a lot more difficult than the previous one that we experienced with the piranha plants. Not least because we're trying to climb upwards up the tower. This one will test you. They place a bunch of spikes along the way and they're put in just the right locations where it's very easy for you to lose a life if you make a mistake. The first star coin is actually just in front of a conveyor belt that's taking you directly towards the spikes. Eventually, just beyond the checkpoint, there's an area where there's a giant conveyor belt that you need to crouch while it takes you under a narrow pathway, requiring you to jump so you can break the blocks overhead and collect the second star coin. And then finally, by hanging off of an overhead rope, you can swing across like monkey bars and grab the third star coin before dropping down and heading into the boss room. Quickly defeat Bowser Jr. and you can head on to the next one, either 6-5 or 6B. In this case, I did 6B first. You're still up in the mountains, but this time it's an icy stage. Part of the gimmick of this stage is getting a hold of these little ropes that you swing off of, but the ropes are not stagnant, they follow a trail. You'll notice the first star coin down below over a bottomless pit, and while you might be tempted to try to jump down and grab it and wall jump back upwards, what you're actually supposed to do is head backwards and grab the red Koopa shell and throw that at the star coin in order to collect it. After that, you'll make it to a warp pipe that'll skyrocket you upwards. Before moving on to the cliff over to the right, if you lean towards the left, you'll be able to use a Koopa to access the second star coin. And then if you move along while continuing along some more ropes that are on a track, carefully swinging off one of the top of them will put you on a platform where you can crouch and collect a third star coin and head to the end of the stage, which would then bring us back to World 6-5, an underwater level. The biggest thing here are whirlpools that will try to drag you down, as well as the green cheap cheeps that will home in on you. As it were, there are a chain of blocks that you can collect that'll turn you into Invincibility Mario to make it easier to get through the level, and the first star coin is directly along your path, whereas the second one sits inside a bonus room in a yellow pipe near the end of the stage. However, just beyond that, you'll get to a segment where there are giant green cheap cheeps that will home in on you. You might notice that one of the whirlpools that are trying to drag you in have a bunch of brown blocks around them. Sure enough, dropping down between those two will put you in a secret area where you can grab the third and final star coin. This stage is very easy to take multiple hits in, especially because there's so much going on screen with all of the fish. But there are ample power-ups to keep you nice and healthy and make it towards the end of the level, which will finally bring you to the second last stage of this world, World 6-6, a level that takes place on the cliff sides and has chain chomps, which is actually unique to this world. Most of this stage involves utilizing the spinning springs to access various areas, and there is a bit of a hunt in this one, specifically when you're looking for those star coins. That's because the map here is pretty vast, and you can go in multiple directions. So for example, if you move over towards the left, you'll find a star coin that's sitting on top of the peg that's right behind a chain chomp, and actually to the left of that, you'll find another star coin that'll require you to fly upwards and then slam downwards to break the blocks that's protecting it. That will give you the first 2 star coins. Also, I kind of like that star coin that's being hidden behind the chain chomp because it reminds me of the one in Mario 64, more specifically the red coin that's behind the chain chomp in Mario 64. In any case, the actual challenging part of this level that will take a brunt of your time is at the very end, where you have to not only figure out how to move forward, but you have to figure out how to access the hidden warp pipe above to grab the third star coin. It's easy to figure out in hindsight, but basically when you drop down, you need to jump right on the head of this red Koopa, which will bounce you just high enough to access this warp pipe. And in that room, it's pretty easy to grab the final star, head to the warp pipe down below, travel upward through the series of these warp pipes and access the final flag, and head to the final castle of this world. This one can be a pretty big challenge, and I actually had to do multiple lives on this one. There are narrow platforms that move back and forth, and you need to ride them just long enough in order to access the next area. As you move through the stage, and pretty early on, if you're standing too long on one of the platforms, you'll slide right off and enter the lava. You might feel like you're supposed to be jumping down low so you can wall jump and grab the star coin, but in actuality what you're supposed to do is grab the Koopa shell and throw it at the star coin. But even then, it could be a lot easier said than done. I'm not kidding, I think I lost 5 lives just trying to get the first star coin alone. I kept missing the Koopa shell because you're supposed to grab it and then head back to the left platform and throw it from there. But the problem is I was moving too quickly so that when I would make the jump to the left platform, it wouldn't be there to land on. Fortunately, after grabbing the first one, I think the second one was a lot easier. You don't really need to throw anything, you just need to jump down at the right time. The third one, however, is a lot better hidden, and I didn't find it out until after I beat the boss the first time. In this section over here where there are platforms over your head, if you climb up and run across them, you can use the red Koopa to jump on his back, and that'll give you access to that third star coin that's hidden above. And then after jumping through some more platforms, you can make it to the final boss, which is a Monty Mole in a tank. Pretty cool because it's unique, but not really all that difficult. He'll throw some bombs at you, there'll be bullet bills coming out. You just gotta carefully dodge the various projectiles and jump on his head 3 times. He'll get higher each time too. Either way, with Monty Mole defeated, the game will move you towards World 8, but obviously we're going to take a step back and we're gonna head back to the penultimate world of this game. Arguably a world that is just as hard as World 8, maybe slightly below World 8 in difficulty, but definitely more difficult than Worlds 4 and 6. This is, however, undoubtedly the start of the end game, where it is harder than anything before it, and you will quickly start to notice all of those lives that you've saved up throughout this game start to tick downwards. It's time to take on the skies of World 7. And here's where it gets fun. Actually, that's not fair. This game's been fun for quite a while. Immediately, 7-1 throws you up into the sky, puts you on a moving platform that's maneuvering through narrow paths, and requires you to make sure you're activating the correct platforms and standing in the right place in order to collect the gold coins. Meaning there's actually a bit of trial and error early on if you're trying to collect all of the star coins. And if you're not careful, like me, you can very easily be losing 3 or 4 lives before even grabbing the first one. Yeah, they're not messing around anymore. But that's how trial and error works in unforgiving stages. Beyond that, there's more traversal throughout the sky where you're supposed to ride the platforms, and obviously, since you're up in the sky, any mistake means a fall to your doom. After making it through the halfway point, it's pretty easy to grab the third star coin. It's basically right along your path. But it's the second one that's a bit of a struggle, especially while trying to avoid these enemies that are shooting fire at you. As you head through the main path, eventually you'll find one of these flying question mark blocks that'll just be floating through the air. Well, the trick here is that you're supposed to ride it for quite a bit of time, and it'll eventually take you to a green pipe. And sure enough, the bonus room that pipe takes you to will give you the second star. The thing is, if you do take that alternate path for the second star, it'll make you skip over the third one. So either way, you're basically probably going to be doing the stage at least twice. Now, that's just World 7-1. Going straight into it, the second level in this world is a ghost house. Yeah, they're not wasting any time with this one. When you enter the stage, you'll effectively be put into what I will call the hub room, or the main area. You'll be surrounded by 5 doors and probably have to go through all 5 of them in order to find all 3 star coins. Accessing the door on the left will put you in a room with some weird yellow goop. Easy enough, you could just jump forward and grab the star coin and move on to the end of that room. The room above will put you in another room with yellow goop, only this time you're meant to ground pound into said goop so that you can get the second star coin. And you're also going to want to ground pound again on the other side of it so you can activate a switch to spawn the door to go back to the main area. The door on the right will put you in a room where there are a bunch of fingers that are pointing down at you. The fingers are basically pointing towards an invisible block that you can't see, but once you hit it from below, a yellow switch will spawn. By jumping on top of the switch, there will be some platforms that you can use to ride upwards. That'll take you to a door in a room with a P-switch, and you gotta be very quick. If you sprint towards the right and jump and move your way upwards through the map, eventually you will find that third star coin. Keep in mind, you'll probably be experimenting with this quite a bit. You won't find it on the first chance unless you're using a guide. I ran through the stage about 5 times until I figured this one out. After that, if you head towards the door down below, you'll find the exit to the stage. But it is a ghost level, so there is a secret exit as well. In that same room with the P-switch, if instead of going towards the right, you move towards the left side, and you just happen to notice that the third block from the left has a weird shine to it, like it reflects and glitters a little bit, well, if you happen to hit that block from below, it'll spawn a vine that you can climb. Yeah, this one's a bit too well hidden, I think, because of the whole P-switch situation. It means you can't spend that much time noticing this. And it's very obscure. The first time I noticed it, I think I actually ground pounded it and that caused the vine to move downwards, and that's how I figured it out on my second life. But anyway, once you get that vine up there, you can climb up and access a new door. And that will take you over to the red flag exit of this stage, giving you a straight shot to the tower, should you please. But of course, we're going to be heading towards 7-2. This one's pretty unique for this game in that you're meant to stand on a switch that you can control whether it moves right, left, or continue to move upwards. And as you're doing so, you're supposed to hit all the enemies, dodge whatever hazard comes in your way, make sure you break down everything along your path so you can grab the star coins. It's a stage that honestly seems a lot more intimidating than it actually is. It has one of those loops where if you move off from the left side of the screen, you'll pop in from the right side. So the only real tricky part is after the checkpoint, you're supposed to know that you need to jump on one of the Koopas and use its shell to break some bricks by throwing them towards the left side so they can pop out from the right side and damage the bricks that are in the way so that you can grab the star coin. I think I said all that right. Also, try to make sure the elevator doesn't pass you by. I got pretty close to missing it when I grabbed the star coin. Beyond that, outside of avoiding some Koopas along the way, the third and final one is pretty easy to grab, so it's really just that second one that provides any source of challenge in this stage. But I did have to redo the stage a few times just to make sure I did grab that second one, so it does provide a decent challenge, and the challenge is right before the midpoint of the level, so you are at the checkpoint, so it's not too tedious. In any case, after that is 7-3, a stage that is filled with wigglers. And very quickly, it turns into a stage where you are just riding on top of a giant wiggler. I remember thinking this was so cool when I played it on the DS. I don't even know why, like, it's just a typical platforming stage. It's an auto-scroller, but you're on top of a wiggler. Along the way, there will be a boomerang bro that's defending the first star coin. After that, you'll be able to get an invincibility star, and that'll make going through the rest of the level pretty easy as long as you grab the invincibility stars along the way. Likewise, eventually you'll find the second star coin before seeing a boomerang bro near the end of the level. The third star coin can be a bit tricky, however, and if you miss it, you'll have to redo the entire stage in order to try again and grab it. It's hidden in a way where it's like the first time you see it, you might not think it's that big of a deal, but when you try again, you realize, oh, it was kind of obvious. When you enter one of the final rooms, there are a line of bricks that are protecting a gap in the floor. Ground pounding the one just over the gap will give you a vine that you can climb down. While climbing down that vine, you'll notice off to the right is yet the third star coin, which allows you to enter the pipe, take it upwards, and head to the flag and finish the level. All in all, probably the easiest stage in this world so far. But after that, we get to the tower. Kind of just takes a lot of the tropes from the previous towers and makes them harder. More moving gray walls that could crush you, As you're moving up, there is a carefully hidden star coin for you to grab, and really there's nothing insanely spectacular here worth going over, it's just that it gets a lot harder. More hazards that could easily crush you before making it to the end of the stage. More requirements for careful traversal so that you don't lose a life while trying to grab the star coins along your path. There is a bit of a puzzle solving element in some locations, like trying to figure out where to jump and when to jump so that you can make sure you get through a barricade, but quite frankly, you'll probably lose a life while going through this one, even if the third star coin is sitting just to the left of the door that accesses Bowser Jr. The fight here can be a bit trickier because the platform is moving, but for the most part it's the same idea. He'll throw a shell at you, you gotta grab that shell and throw it back at him. As per usual, the fight against Bowser Jr. is the easiest part of the stage. And with that done, we can head to 7-4. It's another one of those massive levels with a bunch of mushrooms that you can use the springs to fly up and search. And really, it's going to be a lot of floating around and trial and error. The first star coin will be on the right side after you go up one of the springs. And the second one will conveniently be just beyond that if you happen to bounce on one of the spring mushrooms, or the bouncing mushrooms rather, the pink ones. And likewise, as long as you keep moving upwards and bouncing around, eventually you'll find the third one, as well as the exit to the right that'll take you to the next segment. Simply enough, if you just continue on, you'll make it to the final flag and you'll have all 3 star coins, and you'll be able to access 7-5. Now there is actually a secret exit for 7-4, but I'm going to talk about that one later. 7-5 has the theming and the layout of the earlier stages. It feels a lot like playing the late stage levels in Super Mario Bros. Where they look like the ones from the first world, but they're full of extra hazards and enemies like bullet bills and bombs. And of course, using said bullet bills and bombs, you'll be able to crack some blocks that will be blocking the first star coin. Due to how many bullet bills and bombs are around on this one, it could actually be a very annoying stage, especially if you're trying to grab the star coins. Now the first one is easy enough as we passed by that already, and the third one, while it is down in a pit in between a bunch of bullet bills, it's also fairly easy to grab. But it's the second one that will give you the most trouble, and it's because you'll have to come back to the stage while you have Mini Mario. So by this point, you know the drill. You head back to World 1-4, you grab 2 mini mushrooms, you come back to this level, you use the bomb to break the path that it's blocking, head down into the warp pipe into this bonus room, and you gotta figure out how to grab this star coin that's being protected and you can't access. But of course, if you look around just a little bit, you'll notice that there is a power-up on the right side, and it's the Mega Mushroom. That'll make you strong enough to shrink the warp pipe that's blocking the star coin and grab that one. Now, you have all 3 star coins, but that's still not the hardest part of this stage. There's a segment near the very end where you have to be pretty efficient. There are 2 bombs. You're going to want to use one that's just directly over it, and then one that's just behind it. And you need to place them in the exact correct location so that they can break the exact right amount of bricks so you can access that warp pipe that's below these blocks. It sounds simple, but it's not, especially because if you waste a single one of those bombs, you're not going to be able to bust open the blocks. What you're not seeing on screen is the amount of times that I had to jump down and start the life over in order to accomplish this task. It is much easier said than done. But anyway, with all the 3 star coins and 7-5 completed, both with the main exit and the secret exit, you can head over to 7-6 and see what kind of challenge awaits you there. It's a stage in the sky where you're jumping through a bunch of mushrooms and dodging Koopas as well as piranha plants to advance throughout the level. Just before the halfway point, if you're curious enough, you'll hit a brick from underneath, and that will allow you to climb a vine up to the sky where you can ride a mushroom and grab the first star coin, and then if you jump off the mushroom and land back into the main area, right in front of you will be the second star coin. Finally, just beyond that is a yellow warp pipe. Accessing that warp pipe will put you in a bonus room. By using the Koopas on the right, if you're able to bounce off of them and time it right, you can access yet another warp pipe that's on the right side of this room, a red one. And that pipe will take you to the third star coin. Following that, it's a straight shot to the end of the level. So now you can head towards 7-7. This one is an auto-scroller. Once again, it's filled with a bunch of Koopas, but there's also the added gimmick of the platforms that will fall to your demise if you stand on them for too long, as well as various types of platforms that usually you have to jump on to activate. Along the way, there will be minor challenges that will quickly require you to shift and grab the star coin before the screen moves on to the next segment. I would say all 3 of them are pretty much in that situation where they're very easy to spot, but also pretty easy to miss if you're not quick enough. And while the third one in particular might be the hardest to grab, it's really the area after the third one that cost me the most lives. Timing a proper jump while avoiding a Koopa in the next segment, for some reason that one gave me a bit of a challenge. In the final area, you'll need to be very quick in how fast you can jump on this revolving platform, and as long as you're able to keep up with the camera, you will reach the end of 7-7 with all 3 star coins. Finally, we can head over to 7-A. This one takes place in the sewers. It's also a pretty big puzzle. There are warp pipes all over this level, and you have to enter and exit the correct warp pipes so you can advance through this one. There's a floating warp pipe that you'll need to enter in order to get to the star coin towards the right, which will require you to slam some blocks from below, some invisible blocks, to make them so that you can stand on them like a platform and enter the pipe. Pretty easy to figure that one out. As you continue along, you might notice an area off to the right where you can wall jump between the wall and a green pipe. Well, if you're curious enough to actually try to wall jump into that green pipe, that'll take you to the second star coin. And yes, this one is very tricky, not only to get into, but also just to figure it out on your own. I honestly didn't even think it was possible. I don't even remember this one. But if you're searching through the stage long enough like I was, eventually you will try to enter every single warp pipe that you could. Beyond that, as you continue to move through the stage, eventually you might find a block that'll give you a blue mushroom. If you use that mini mushroom to wall jump off the pipes, you'll be able to access a smaller pipe that'll give you access to the third star coin. This one obviously was a lot easier to find just because you're looking for the mini pipe after you get the mini blue mushroom. Finally, sneaking around and moving towards the right side of the stage, you'll find the exit and you'll be done with this very annoying stage. And likewise, it'll give you access to the final castle of this very annoying world. So this brings back one of those gimmicks from the older Mario games, similar to a lot of the stages from Super Mario World, where you would just be standing on this set of blocks that will move in its own pathway, and you gotta basically find a way to remain on the blocks while avoiding hazards and of course grabbing all of the collectibles along the way. The first star coin will show up pretty early on, and it will not be a challenge to grab at all. As you move through and get past the checkpoint, you'll be in an area where there are swinging balls on a chain that you have to avoid while still heading through the stage. On a block that one of those balls and chain are connected to, you will find the second star coin. Again, it's a careful jump, but it should very much be easy to grab. The third and final one is a lot harder and will likely take you multiple attempts. At least it took me multiple attempts, and that's very annoying. Because it's a challenge where if you make a mistake, you get sent back to the start of the level, or rather the checkpoint, which means you gotta go through half the level in order to try to grab this one again. I'll have my montage playing in the background while you figure out how long it took me to get this one. Honestly, this is one of those situations where if I was not trying to make a video on this, I would have used a save state. Yeah, I know that's a cop-out, but I don't care. Look, sometimes I appreciate the finer things about the classics, but other times, the classics were just built off of BS challenges. The idea here is that as soon as these blocks jump down, you need to jump. And I swear the timing of that is a lot easier said than done. I think I only missed it like 2 or 3 times, by the way, but it's just that every single time you miss it, you gotta go start over from the checkpoint, and it's just so annoying. And look, the cool thing is the boss fight, it's pretty memorable. It's not hard by any means, but it's iconic at least. Takes place up in the sky with this like thunder rock and roll version of Lakitu. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, you're still gonna be able to avoid him and beat him in one try by jumping on his head 3 times, but hey, at least the visuals are a little bit more iconic than some of the other boss fights we've seen in this franchise. Either way, that's World 7. It's a secret world with a lot of secret hidden areas. Either secret areas where you have to find a star coin, or secret areas that will give you access to a secret exit, or, in some cases, puzzles that you need to solve just to find the end of the level. I think it's a lot of fun, but it also took me an hour and 45 minutes to get through, which at this point would be the longest world of the entire game for me so far. Because you gotta remember, not only are these puzzles a little bit more difficult, but just in general the difficulty increased, so there are more of those random deaths where you bump into a Goomba or a Koopa, or mistime you jump. We're up in the sky for this one, so if you make a mistake, typically speaking, you're falling to your demise and having to start over, at least from the last checkpoint. Is it unfair? Most of it, I would say no. There might be some moments where it's like, okay, they should have designed that a little better, but for the most part, I think it was actually properly designed, and it really feels like it's the second last world in the game. The same way that World 1 felt like that's how the game should start, and it progressively got more challenging with every world, I feel like World 7 genuinely feels like this is a world where you have to be tested and challenged to accomplish and earn the right to access World 8. And it's very similar to how I felt when I went through World 6, because remember, World 6 and World 7 both give you access to World 8. Now, with all that being said, World 8 is the final one here. There are bonus areas in World 8, but there's no secret special world that's beyond World 8. So let's head over to that and finish off this adventure. it's time for the final world, World 8. I mean, what can I say? This is the climax. This is the ultimate challenge. This is the greatest test of the game. Whether you decided to blast through cannons and try to get here as quickly as possible, or if you simply decided to just linearly move through the game and try to accomplish whatever stage you can, not caring about the collectibles. Maybe you didn't even look at 4 and 7 and you just kept going without redoing the boss fights with the mini mushroom. Or if you're like us and you decided to play through every single stage, find every single hidden secret, collect every star coin imaginable, and then head towards this final challenge to endure. Regardless of how you decided to play through this adventure, this is the culmination of all of that. Something I actually really appreciate about the World 8 in New Super Mario Bros. DS is that it's not just a typical castle world, right? Like typically you would show up to World 8 and you would see just lava everywhere, and all of the stages have the same Bowser castle theming. Now don't get me wrong, there is going to be a lot of that as we near towards the end of this world, but instead it kind of stands out a bit because the final world is a haunted theme. Feels like you're in mysterious haunted woods. Almost like this was designed for Halloween. Entering into 8-1, there are black crows flying overhead that will drop down and homing attack you. The Goombas have jack-o'-lantern heads as if they just came out of a scary movie. There's an eerie fog draped in with the creepy background. I remember even when I played this on the DS many years ago, showing up to this and being like, oh yeah, this is definitely the final world. They want you to nervously jump through this one. A dark and mysterious melody is in the background, and very quickly what starts off as a single homing crow that goes down and attacks you turns into a flock of birds that are just frequently flying down and trying to knock you out. Before you know it, there's a block that you have to strategically hit from below, even though there's no ground directly beneath it, and doing so will give you access to a spring. Placing that spring over to some blocks over on the right, again while dodging the crows that are attacking you, will throw you upwards and give you a chance to quickly grab the first star coin. 3 lives. That's actually what it took for me to grab that first star coin. I'm telling you, it's a lot easier said than done. Fortunately, shortly after that, you will reach the checkpoint. And even more fortunate, by navigating around some bullet bills and using them to reach the other 2 star coins, you should be able to grab them and end the stage, moving you directly into World 8-2. It has an underground theme, but it's also a combination with a water theme. Most of the gimmick here will require you to raise the water level while carefully avoiding the skeeters that are dropping bombs onto you, so you can either advance or collect star coins. Eventually, after you make it into a room with a whole bunch of bricks, through a whole lot of trial and error, or perhaps by following a guide, you'll discover that the best way to collect the first star coin is to simply perform a ground pound directly underneath a block that will give you a power-up. And conveniently, that will also take you to the first checkpoint. In the next segment, you'll need Mario to raise the water level so you can swim upwards, while once again dodging the 2 skeeters that are dropping bombs down onto you. And once you do reach the top, you need to use those skeeters in order to reach the star coin that's just out of reach. Once again, this is much easier said than done. Either way, after what felt like, I don't know, 10 lives, I did eventually get it. Fortunately, this was a challenge that started right after the checkpoint, so even if you did lose a life and had to start over, it's not like you had to repeat a lot of the stage. The funny thing is, I think I was only able to grab it after collecting a mini mushroom that was given to me through one of those bonus blocks at the start of the level, so I didn't even grab it the intended way. Well, actually, I did manage to do it once. It was on my first try, but after grabbing that star coin, I lost my life before getting into the pipe. Finally, once you do get to the next segment, the water level will rise and there are 2 different sections you can move into. Over towards the right is the star coin, over towards the left is the warp pipe that will take you to the end of the level. And that will let us move over to World 8-Tower. I did find the mini mushroom pretty useful over here, because it is a vertical level once again, and the floaty jumps allowed me to access the higher points without too much of an effort. Especially some of these wall jumps, man. Like once you bounce off of the wall, Mario can get really vertical. The first 2 star coins will be pretty easily to grab just along your path as long as you're diligent. You might have to be a little bit creative in how to reach them, but it doesn't really take that much effort, not to spot them nor to reach them. The 3rd star coin is the one that probably would give most people more challenge, but again, if you're doing this with the mini mushroom, it's a lot easier, because you can just jump on top of the block and bounce off of the wall, and you'll be able to reach it pretty easily with a single wall jump. I realize this is in World 8, so by this point a player will have gotten used to using the mini mushroom a lot more, but while I typically do enjoy using the mini mushroom, it was definitely in this level where I really started to understand the value of it. That floaty jump can be extremely useful once you do eventually get used to the weight of Mario's trajectory. And the fortunate part is, when I did get to the fight against Bowser, well, I had the Mega Mushroom there, which meant insta-kill for Bowser Jr., and a direct shot to World 8-3. Something I do appreciate about World 8 is that there are a lot of different power-up houses along the way, toad houses that provide either an item or 1-ups. And since we've been collecting star coins throughout the entirety of the adventure, and full completion actually requires you to spend every one of those star coins, I did find it was very useful that as I completed every single one of these stages, I was able to at least have some extra inventory while I entered these difficult levels. And of course, this is largely a benefit of collecting everything that you can along the way in this game. Now that being said, World 8-3 is an underwater stage, so you're going to want a fire flower, which you can grab early on. Otherwise, you're going to have to spend a lot of time dodging the eels. You know what's funny is I used to think the eels were only really creepy looking in Mario 64, and while definitely the eel in Super Mario 64 is still the one that terrified me the most, the ones over here in New Super Mario Bros. DS, well, they're still kind of soulless and creepy, just not to the same extent. They're definitely not as playful looking as some of the later ones you'll see in this franchise. In any case, this level is full of them, including a giant one after you reach the checkpoint. Basically, turning the stage into an auto-scroller because you will not be able to move backwards once you do head forward, which means you have to effectively grab all 3 of the star coins along the way while being quick on your feet because some of them will require you to quickly swing back and grab it before the eel gets to you. This is all very accomplishable even in a single life, but as long as you miss a single star coin, and you likely will because you don't know exactly where they're placed, you're probably going to have to repeat the stage a few times. Regardless of how many times you repeat the stage, as long as you're quick enough while swimming and you have a fire flower, you should be able to get through this one without losing a single life. Taking us straight to 8-4. It still has the haunted theming, but it has the added bonus of taking place kind of on the cliff sides. There are many platforms that you're going to need to jump between, as well as a whole lot of spiders dropping in from the top of the level. So you'll need to carefully take advantage of bouncing off of the spiders in order to access some hard to reach places, like this cliffside over here, for example, that will give you the first star coin. The second one will appear overhead while you bounce between different platforms and avoid various spiders, and be pretty easy to grab. And as you head towards the end of the stage, you might notice that there is a mini pipe. And of course, just beyond that mini pipe is the end of the stage, which means the third star coin is going to require you to come back to this one when you have a mini mushroom. So of course, that's exactly what I did. I went and grabbed the mini mushroom from World 1, came back to this level, did my very best to keep at least one of the mini mushrooms and make it towards that pipe. Grabbing the star coin is pretty easy, but you are going to need to make sure you're holding on to a star. Otherwise, you can't really run through the narrow pathway that will grant you the third star coin and allow you to access the World 8 Castle. Obviously, if you've played any Mario game before, you know that this is not going to be the last level in the game, but seeing as how this game released in the mid-2000s and it was the first 2D Mario game released in a very long time, you'd be forgiven if you were one of those people that thought it was actually the last level in the game when you did finally get to it. And it is hard, especially grabbing the third star coin. Traversal through this level will require you to slam a few of these blocks that will move the location of the various platforms, and by hitting those blocks in the right location, it'll allow you to pretty easily grab the first 2 star coins. The unfortunate challenge, obviously, is that those first 2 star coins appear prior to the first checkpoint, so if you do lose a life, you're going to have to repeat the whole thing over and over again until you can finally make it to the checkpoint without losing a life. Now, you would think that if you did make it to the checkpoint without losing a life, that meant you were safe now. You wouldn't have to repeat anything from the beginning of the stage. All you gotta do is make sure you grab the third star coin and head to the end of the level. As you can see over here, there's a pathway just beyond the castle door that if you enter underneath it, you can head to that third star coin. But I did lose a life while trying to get to that area, so I had to start over from the checkpoint. After a few more dumb losses of life that were nothing more than my own issue for trying to move too quickly, I did eventually make it back to that final area where you swing off of the rope, except, well, there was no platform down below, which means there must have been a switch that I missed. Now, in my case at this point, I just went and decided to defeat Dry Bones Bowser. Doing so puts you in a cutscene where, of course, World 8 just gets larger now. I mentioned previously there aren't any bonus worlds in this game, but there are bonus levels in World 8. So the final world is extended quite a bit, and it does have multiple towers and multiple castles along the way. Now, before we move on to those additional levels, we gotta get the third star coin in this first castle. Basically, the whole issue here is that in order to get the platform to show up at the very end of the level, you need to hit these blocks along the way. So yes, while maybe you do not have to go through the level yet again and collect the first 2 star coins, you do have to go through the level again and not lose a single life even after the checkpoint while hitting all of these blocks as you move through the stage. And that seems easy enough, except if you don't hit the right block before you do make it to the end of the stage, there's still not going to be a platform over there when you get to the end, which obviously means starting over once again from the very beginning of the level. And this is also problematic because now, if you do make it towards the end of the level, you're going to have to beat Bowser yet again in order to start back from the beginning instead of starting from the checkpoint. Alternatively, you could also just quit from the game, go back to the main menu, and then head inside the castle. It'll take you back to the previous save point, so then you can start from the beginning of the stage. Now, throughout all of this conversation, I've lost a bunch of lives, I've repeated the stage a few times, I've already been stressed by going through World 8 altogether after going through World 7 prior to that. Fortunately, upon re-entering this one, I just hit every single block as I could along the way throughout my traversal to the checkpoint, and that made sure that the platform was still there when I got to the end. Mind you, even then, it's careful jumping and platforming in order to make sure that you can grab that star coin, which you can easily mess up and fall into the lava like I did, which means starting the level over again, except you got a checkpoint, so you have to quit back again to the main menu and then head back into the stage so that you can start from the beginning of the level. Otherwise, you're going to be at the checkpoint and you won't be able to access that area for the third star coin. Sounds like a pain. It is a pain. It's very annoying, and I would 100% understand if somebody playing this game in 2026 cheats a little bit and ends up using save states. Seriously, this is the kind of stuff where modern gamers would not tolerate. This is the kind of stuff where even back in the day, we're like, yo, this game is dumb. Why is it making me do this? But as you would come to expect with every single one of these classic titles, especially the Mario games from the previous years, it has one of those retro game bottlenecks. Now, the retro game bottlenecks, these are things that I've discussed pretty intensely throughout many of my videos. And they're basically just these annoying major difficulty spikes that used to pop up in games and require you to play the same segment over and over and over again, and every single time you redid it, you just got that much better at doing it. The sense of accomplishment every time you get through a retro game bottleneck is almost as good as beating an entire game. So yes, in many cases, these retro game bottlenecks were poor game design. Sometimes they were downright broken, like the silver ball puzzle in Sonic 06, for example. But the feeling of satisfaction when you overcome one of those, oh, there is nothing like it. And let me tell you, by the time I actually was able to grab this third star coin, I was about to pull my hair out if I had failed one more time. And the funny thing is though, it's not even the end of the game. Now it's time to move forward. So remember earlier when I said that getting into World 8, it could have just easily done a lava stage or taken place inside a volcano? Well, that's exactly what the next stage of World 8-5 was. If you felt like the World 8 theming was not appropriate for the final world in the game, well, this is where it pops up. The area down below is all lava. There are platforms where you step on them once and they will fall into the lava. There are potaboos firing upwards. Platforms on chains that you have to quickly move for. Minor challenges where you're going to need to go down and grab a star coin before falling into the fire, and even in one case, you need to use a shell in order to throw it and hit that star coin, meaning if you miss it with the Koopa shell, like I did, you have to redo the stage or at least come back to the same area while the Koopa's still there. And of course, very quick jumps at the very end in order to grab the third star coin, which I was able to do in one turn, but you make one big mistake and you're starting over in the entire stage because you cannot access those platforms again. World 8-5 is not ridiculously difficult by any means, but if you're able to get through it in only 1 or 2 lives, it means that you have gotten very comfortable controlling Mario. But if you played this stage 2, 3, even maybe even 1 or 2 worlds ago, you might not have the platforming mastery of this title yet to get through it so comfortably. And it's part of the reason why I keep bringing up that difficulty spike in this game, because the way this game progressively gets more challenging as you head through it is such a treat, especially because the last few Mario games that I've played and covered on this channel, while they did have a pretty good advancement in the difficulty, it's nothing like the experience of playing a game from the early to mid 2000s. Let me tell you something, New Super Mario Bros. For all intents and purposes is an easy franchise. And I think it's easy for many people because in their minds they're like, oh yeah, I was able to get through and defeat Bowser without a challenge. This is pretty typical of almost every single Mario game. Just playing through it one time, heading towards the end credits, it's going to be a very easy adventure. But just like we've seen with so many other Mario titles, it's when you have to go for that full completion that you're truly tested. And this one tested me, make no mistake. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out how to grab everything along the way. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out where every single star coin was, because most of those star coins either required a pretty deep thought of problem solving, or more importantly, a platforming challenge. And sometimes it wasn't about getting the star coin, it was just about finishing the level. Other times it could just be a single star coin that was the challenge. But either way, through most of the levels as you head through this game, there's going to be at least one moment where you're like, oh, crap, I gotta do this a few times in order to accomplish it. And I wholeheartedly appreciated that. There's effectively one thing that New Super Mario Bros. Has that the classic games did not have when it comes to this challenge. And it is the amount of lives that you get to get through this one. I mean, even with all of the lives that I lost in in the latter half of this game, I was still sitting halfway through World 8 with 63 lives. And it's because the game was extremely generous with the 1-ups. When you play the classic games, you get more game overs. You start over from the beginning of the world. You have to repeat levels over and over again. It was the way that games were played back in the day. And it's really the only reason some of those games are more difficult than this one is. If you go back and revisit the classic Sonic, Mario, and Donkey Kong titles now, usually people are using save states to get through them. So they're like, oh, these games aren't too bad of a challenge, it's fun to go through. They still enjoy the games, but they're actually beating the titles in just a few hours, which was not the case back in the day. Because without those save states, those game overs, oh, they would set you back. They'd make you put the controller down, be like, I gotta take a 3-day break from this one and come back when I have a clearer head. I would say the new Super Mario Bros. Game, specifically this new Super Mario Bros. DS, is just about as challenging as those classic titles were on the NES and on the SNES, but the generosity of the 1-ups makes it feel a lot easier. And even then, it's only really easy if you're heading straight to Bowser and not trying to go for full completion. I'm excited to move on to the next new Super Mario Bros. Titles in this series, because I do wonder if the level design translates to those games. But at least for this one, while they made it very approachable for the newcomers to the franchise or those that maybe have not played a single Mario game in 10 or 15 years, they also made it very fun to master this one. I use the word fun very carefully here because it's challenging, and while it might have some frustrating moments, overall it's not a frustrating challenge. It kind of hits that sweet spot where you can play through this game without feeling like it's a chore to get through, but you will enjoy going back to this one on revisits without feeling like it's just a mindless, simply hold right and press A a few times just to get to the end of the game. But that being said, we do need to end this game, and World 8-5 sees you climbing a volcano. So it's kind of like a tower stage, only instead of a tower, it is a volcano. There is a gimmick here where escaping from one side of the stage brings you out from the other, and you'll figure that out very quickly. Not only will it be necessary to move forward in some cases, but it will also be required so that you can grab every single star coin. Using various springs will propel you upwards, as well as some more pipes along the way that will blast you to the next platform. The lava is actually pretty quickly on your tail. Obviously in part because you need to grab all of the star coins along the way, which takes you a little bit longer to move forward, but still, I definitely lost a few lives even though I was able to grab all 3 star coins and finish this one in just a few minutes. 8-7. You're going to need to bounce on a whole lot of Koopas to get through this one. Defeating a Sumo Bro will allow you to run underneath to grab the first star coin before you get to some cliffs that you have to shimmy across. Beyond that, it's careful traversal while avoiding various Koopas as well as Fire Bros, and then finally you'll make it to a challenge where you need to defeat a Boomerang Bro in order to comfortably grab the second star coin. But it's the third star coin that will require just a little bit of problem solving. You'll need to lure the Sumo Bro into slamming down the platforms that are below him, assuming of course you don't have a mushroom power-up, like I didn't, making sure that he only defeats the first 2 platforms that are beneath him before jumping on his head and grabbing the star coin. Doing so, and then avoiding a few more enemies along the way that can and will defeat you if you're not careful, you'll be able to head to the end of the stage. Finally, that takes us to 8-8. As soon as this one starts, the volcanoes in the background will blast off a bunch of boiling rocks towards you. These are hazards that will be raining down on you as you head through this entire level, which, as you can imagine, would make it pretty difficult. Especially because throughout the stage there are a bunch of bombs, and if these embers hit those bombs, it will light them up and they'll try to run towards you and explode. While being very careful in the very beginning to jump to the platform upwards, avoiding all of the embers that are falling down on you, and grab the first star coin. Advancing through the level, you'll notice that there is a mini pipe buried beneath some bricks that you can't break. So obviously you're going to have to come back to this one with a mini mushroom, while also being very careful and allowing the stage to destroy the blocks that are on top of that mini pipe. But once you do that, you head downwards and then basically you need to figure out a way to get through this maze in order to grab the star coin and head back to the pipe to exit this room. Just beyond where you do exit from, you'll find the third star coin surrounded by blocks, which the debris from the lava will have to come down and destroy, so you can quickly jump up and grab that. It's technically a straight shot to the flag, but it's not really that easy because you still have to avoid the hazards which are destroying the platforms in front of you. And fortunately, when that's done, you can head to the next tower stage of this world. This is another one of those gimmicks where you have to ride along the green blocks, avoiding hazards along the way, whether it's the spikes or the fireballs, being quick enough to jump in the right time to grab the star coins, but not too quick that you accidentally take damage from one of the spike balls that will be dropping in from overhead, especially because the third star coin is hidden behind one of those spike balls. Easy enough to get through with one shot, however, and if you do get to Bowser Jr. and you happen to have a Mega Mushroom once again like I did, well, that was your chance to take advantage of that and defeat Bowser in a single hit. Which finally brings us to the final castle of this game, the ultimate boss fight. The second boss castle in this world, and technically the first Bowser castle. It actually looks a lot different than some of the other ones in the game. The biggest gimmick to get through this stage, which actually will probably test you quite a bit, is that you need to find various yellow switches to turn the entire stage around. Like I'm talking, you're rotating it where the ceiling becomes the floor or the walls might become the floor. Every time you hit a switch, it might give you access to a door that you might have not been able to reach before. But it's not just problem solving. Like these are the kind of challenges that you would normally find in a ghost house, where maybe the biggest hazard would be the boos, where if you just look at them, they'll stop moving. Part of the issue with this one is that there are flame torches that are just keep shooting out at you, so you gotta stay on your toes. You also have some of the usual enemies like thwomps and dry bones that show up, and despite this stage having a pretty involved puzzle-solving element to it, it is surprisingly more linear than I expected it would be, in that figuring out where every single switch is usually will give you access to the door that you're meant to go through, unlike in some of the ghost houses where you might end up in the wrong location. Advancing through the level as well will give you little secrets or hints as to where the star coins might be. So for example, when you enter this room with the thwomps, you'll see it overhead, so you probably should be able to easily figure out that you gotta move upwards so you can grab that star coin. And then of course, by digging around and hitting every single one of those blocks, eventually you'll find another switch which will give you access to the next segment and a chance to grab the second star coin. Fortunately, after that, it is a checkpoint, so you're done with the whole puzzle of trying to flip the world around. But this final room is an awesome callback to the Bowser Castle from the previous titles, specifically from Super Mario Bros. On the NES, the first Mario Bros. Game, where you'll have 3 or 2 different routes that require you to either jump through the middle, top, or bottom, so that you can hear the right chime and advance through the stage. Every wrong route you take will require you to start over, just like it was in the classic title. And hopefully once you make it past that, you have a mushroom, because then you can break a brick and grab the third star coin and head to the final fight of the game. If I'm being completely honest, I think this is kind of underwhelming. There's a cute little cutscene where Bowser Jr. throws Bone Bowser back into this cauldron so that he can turn into Bowser again, full of life. And what's happening here is effectively you're just taking on Bowser Jr. and Bowser, both in the same way that you defeated them before, except this time it's at the same time. So your fight against Bowser Jr. means that you're gonna have to grab the shells that he throws at you, and by hitting him 3 times he will be defeated. And for Bowser, once he makes his big leap into the sky, you just gotta run below him and hit the switch, and that's it. You've saved Peach. You did it. Again. For the 100th time. Although I think around the time of this game, it was probably fewer than 10 times still. But I'll tell you something, it never gets old. There is nothing like closing the chapter on a Mario title, especially the old school ones that really tested you. I appreciate the sketchbook that this game goes through, basically showing you a screenshot from every single level in this game. It's such a pleasing reward, and it's a good chance to kind of reminisce and think about the entire adventure that you just went through. And what's cool about it is, even though a lot of this game can feel like it looks the same depending on which level you're in, many of the set pieces they use for these screenshots are actually pretty unique, and they're parts that only took place in a single stage. So even if the new Super Mario Bros. Game, the whole franchise really can feel generic at times, at least when you're going through the different screenshots of these stages, you do tend to remember those worlds, and more specifically those levels, because the gimmicks and the set pieces in those stages were fairly unique. And to give you just a little bit of humor at the end, it shows Bowser Jr. pulling his dad, giving a final glance at the camera before seeing the words, "The End." Look, it's a great finale. There's no way around it. World 8 does an excellent job being a World 8. Sometimes an ending of a game can be wrong. It could feel flat, it could feel like it's anticlimactic. I don't think that's the case for this one. But there is a matter of full completion, and full completion in New Super Mario Bros. Is only truly done when you see 3 stars on your save file, which for some reason I didn't quite understand at the time, so it took me another 20 minutes to figure that out. You gotta run through the entire world or click on each different map to see did you actually accomplish everything. My save file only had 2 stars, so one of those is for beating the game, the other one is collecting for the star coins. And you can see on the map on every single world it says complete with a star coin if you happen to get every single star coin in those stages. So I knew I had at least those. I thought for a second that maybe I had to go through every single one of these toad houses, so I grabbed the 1-ups in the first one, and then I saw a purple toad house in the very beginning. That wasn't there before. Well, going into that, there are 4 different wallpapers that will allow you to change the background for the bottom screen of the DS, which is very cool, and I kind of wish was around from the very beginning because these wallpapers are pretty neat, especially the one that gives you World 1-1 from the original Super Mario Bros. This also would put you at 0 star coins, which means you spent every single one of your star coins, and that's actually a requirement for full completion. So basically, you have exactly enough star coins to not only unlock every single one of those bonus paths along your way, whether they were used to access a bonus room for power-ups or 1-ups or just a whole new level altogether, but with the final 80 star coins that you have at your disposal, you're required to buy these 4 different wallpapers, and that is a requirement for full completion. And after you do that, you'll even get like a little animation where Mario will celebrate because it says the game is complete. So once again, I thought maybe that meant that now I had my 3rd star on the save file, but I didn't. And then you know how it goes. You're going through every single world to see if maybe there was a path that you missed. Looking at the map at the bottom screen, you can kind of see the different ways that the pathways converge and diverge. And that's usually easy enough to tell if you missed something. Otherwise, you can also just run through everything and see if there's something that you didn't spot. And well, I figured out where mine was. Do you remember back in World 7 where we finished one of those levels and I said that there was a secret exit, but we'll get back to it later? This is where I got back to it. It's the 1-up house up top that I did not access yet. I needed to grab a mini mushroom and revisit 7-4. It's the one where you're moving upwards on the bouncing mushrooms. On the top left corner of the stage is a lone question mark block with wings. Jump on that, access the platform above it, jump even further forward, go through the mini pipe, and you get to go through the red flag. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of bummed that I missed that one because typically I don't like beating the final castle until I've unlocked every one of those things because I like to feel like it's the climax when I defeat Bowser for the last time. But yeah, you know, sometimes things just slip through the cracks, I guess. Either way, it felt very nice to look into the main menu, hover over the save file, and see the 3 stars. Because quite frankly, no matter how many different one of these games I get through, no matter how many times I play through the same game sometimes, there is never anything quite like that feeling you get when you fully complete a game. And because the Mario franchise is unquestionably my favorite franchise in the entirety of gaming, the feeling that I get when I fully complete a Mario title is honestly unmatched. Especially when it's coming from a game that I have so much nostalgia for. I think nostalgia has played a very big role in the entirety of my retrospective series. Anytime I go through these deep dives, I tend to really hype up just how valuable some of these games were for the time. And I think I've kind of alluded to this before, but just because I'm nostalgic for it, it doesn't mean that I think that my nostalgia and my experience and the games that were available when I was younger are better than they are now, because naturally that would be completely subjective. But what I can say for certain is that subjectively, for me, these games that I played growing up have a very special place in my heart, and more often than not, I do feel like they were better games, subjectively. Sometimes they may feel dated, but fortunately with the Mario franchise, it's usually pretty timeless. And I think it's part of the genius of not only what makes these games so great, but what also makes them so memorable. Obviously, they have some downsides. We just keep seeing the same stuff recycled over and over again and re-released, but hey, at least it's the good stuff from the olden days coming back for people to enjoy now as much as I enjoyed them back then. Now, to be fully transparent about where this channel might go next, I'll be honest, I was not planning on playing New Super Mario Bros. DS. I alluded to previously, but I wanted to play Odyssey or maybe even Banjo-Tooie. But now that I've completed Super Mario Bros. DS, well, obviously, New Super Mario Bros. Wii has to show up at some point. So I will not be committing what I'm covering next. If you're watching this in the future, that next video might already be available. But if not, keep an eye out for my channel, because I'm sure at some point I will make an announcement about what I'm playing, and if I'm playing the game and I'm using it as background footage for the other channels that I have, you'll probably know what's coming next. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this trip back down the memory that is New Super Mario Bros., which obviously is not a new game anymore. We're at the 20-year anniversary at the time of recording, but even as a 20-year-old title played in 2026, well, this one definitely gets the job done. In any case, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I will catch you on the next one.